Chapter 2637. The Elven Empress, who had been missing for a long time, had reappeared. This sudden change had exposed all of his lies. However, this was not the worst part. The worst part was that the true spirit of the Holy Emperor Palace had been killed by accident, and the true spirit had returned. This meant that the secret that he had been hiding for more than 1,000,000 years had been exposed in public. All these tragedies came one after another. It was too much for the eye to take in. Even the saint, with his high mental fortitude, couldn't help but be at a loss after suffering so many blows. Now what should I do? There was no way to deal with this at all. There was no other way. The only thing he could think of was destruction. There was only destruction. He might as well destroy the people in front of him. Everyone. Not a single one of them was allowed to live in this world. In this way the secret was still a secret. But could he really do it? For the first time in more than 1,000,000 years, the saint had doubts about himself. Everyone be careful. Cloud Master is the master behind the 1,000 holiness true spirits. The arrow god shouted loudly. The arrows in his hands turned into shooting stars and flew continuously. He even shouted at the people from the Saint Emperor Palace. You are all from the Saint Emperor Palace. You should be righteous and ward off evil. Why are you still working for the master of the 1,000 holiness true spirits? The experts from the Saint Emperor Palace ignored him and continued to fight to the death. Shui Leihan sighed. Brother Arrow God. These people have already been turned into the 1,000 holiness true spirits by Cloud Master. They definitely can't be reasoned with. Only by killing them can they be freed. Bastard. Only then did the Arrow God realize. In a rage he shot thousands of arrows. This time, it was an indiscriminate attack that swept through the whole place. The 5 elven gods attacked at the same time. The experts from the Saint Emperor Palace were attacked from both inside and outside. They were defeated step by step. Of course, each of these people was a top-notch expert. Their combat power was not weak. But they were not only facing Mo Tianji and the rest. There was also the 5-man team with the strongest combat power of the elven race in Donghuang. Their combined combat power was at least twice that of De and the Empress. Without a doubt, this was definitely the most powerful force in the Heavenly Imperial Court. And this force was fighting and killing with them. Even if they were all experts and had the advantage in numbers, what was the use? How could they withstand such a crushing? Almost instantly, half of the people had died. They had all lost their lives here. Half of these people died at the hands of the elven archer god and Xie Danqiong. The elven archer god's arrows fell like rain, and Xie Danqiong's jasper flower seed changed from confusing the enemy to attacking indiscriminately in a large area due to the sudden betrayal of the 5 elven gods. How could the lethality of these 2 large area attacks be small? The sage saw that the situation was extremely bad. He forced himself to calm down, and the might of the mountain and river sword in his hand became even more intense. He hoped to defeat or even kill the Demon Empress as soon as possible, so that he could defeat the enemy and establish his dominance, and salvage the situation. If the Demon Empress was directly killed by him at such a moment, then it would be a great achievement that would be sufficient to awe everyone present. However, what kind of experience did the Demon Empress have? Seeing that the situation was in her favor and that the saint was blindly attacking, she hoped that he could take her down. The Demon Empress simply gave up on attacking and switched to defense. She didn't seek to attack the enemy and only sought not to make any mistakes. The Demon King's hook did its best to defend against the enemy while the saint tried in vain to defeat the Demon Empress. It was simply wishful thinking. And the situation was still continuing to develop in a direction that was unfavorable to the sage. A long whistle suddenly sounded, and a brilliant and dazzling sword light, like the scorching sun suddenly falling from the sky, rushed into the group of experts from the Saint Emperor Palace. The Fairy Emperor's seal, which had changed the stance of the fairy race, was shining brightly above the person's head. Calamity Sword. Chu Yang. At this moment, Chu Yang, who had recovered, finally rushed out and joined the battle. In fact, Chu Yang had already dissolved the medicinal efficacy of the heavy pill. It was just that the unexpected appearance of the Fairy Emperor's seal and the appearance of the Fairy Empress had caused him to pause for a moment. And in that short moment of stagnation, he almost exploded from holding it in. At this moment he could finally make a move. So what if it was the ultimate version of massacre the world? At this moment Chu Yang really needed to vent. Especially when the medicinal efficacy of the heavy pill was still growing in his body. It was as if his whole body had swelled up, but he didn't have the slightest bit of strength to vent it out. Chu Yang shouted. Before the first sword strike was finished, another sword strike was launched. At least 300 experts from the Saint Emperor Palace were all killed by his 2 sword strikes. The ultimate Calamity Sword move's power was naturally extremely terrifying. Because of the abundant vital energy at this moment, the power of the ultimate Calamity Sword move could be said to be at its peak. 300 experts were killed in 2 sword strikes, and all of them were experts among experts. Such power was truly terrifying. After defeating the enemies with 2 sword strikes, Chu Yang didn't seem to need to catch his breath. He rushed towards the Saint Emperor with his sword. The sword light surged. The distance of 1,000 feet between the two was covered in a flash. At this moment, the Demon Empress Demon King's hook and the Saint Emperor's mountain and river sword collided once again. The Demon Empress staggered back, but the Saint Emperor didn't move at all. The Saint Emperor's cultivation was originally higher than the Demon Empress. At this moment, with the continuous deaths of the 10,000 saints' true spirits, although the Saint Emperor's strength was constantly decreasing, his own strength was constantly increasing. Under this situation, even though the Demon Empress was on the defensive, she was still at a disadvantage. The Saint Emperor was about to follow up with another attack, but Chu Yang had already rushed towards him with his sword at an unparalleled speed. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes and Chu Yang was already standing in front of him. With a loud shout, it was like a thunderclap on a clear day. Following that, his sword brought along a thunderous explosion and slashed down brazenly, smashing down. At this moment, there was no need for him to use any sword moves. What Chu Yang needed was purely a head-on collision, that kind of extreme collision. Only this kind of extreme and barbaric collision could vent the cultivation that was swelling in his body at this moment. If not for this, Chu Yang felt that he was going to explode in the next moment. It was a pity that the Saint Emperor wasn't clear about Chu Yang's current situation. If he knew, he would use a guerrilla tactic. As long as the battle dragged on for a while, Chu Yang might not be able to hold on and explode first. It was a pity that the Saint Emperor didn't know. Furthermore, Chu Yang's speed was too fast. The Saint Emperor, who was completely unprepared, had no time to dodge. He didn't even have time to change his moves. If he were to forcefully dodge, he would only be at a disadvantage. Furthermore, he was at the peak of his cultivation. Why would he be afraid of a head-on collision? If he could heavily injure Chu Yang in the midst of a head-on collision, it would be a great thing. He didn't believe that at such a young age, his cultivation could be compared to 1,000,000 years of bitter cultivation. In view of this, the Saint Emperor made up his mind and fiercely countered with the Mountain River Sword. As a result, 2 peerless divine weapons collided in the sky for the first time. At this moment, it was as if 2 meteors flying at high speed in the sky had suddenly collided. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion rang out, shaking the universe. The gods and devils were all shocked. Demons were silenced. Boom! A mushroom cloud soared into the sky, and a powerful shockwave spread out in all directions at an extremely fast speed from the place where Chu Yang and the Holy Sage were fighting. Not only did this shockwave spread at an extremely fast speed, it was also accompanied by a huge destructive power. A destructive power that was enough to kill people. The space within a radius of a few hundred feet had completely turned into a space crack and a space black hole. It was filled with the aura of death. It swallowed all life in this area that couldn't resist this power. In the surroundings, the weaker experts of the Saint Emperor Palace were hit by this shock wave until they bled from their 7 orifices. They couldn't stand and fell to the ground. Even Shui Leihan's body shook violently the moment he came into contact with the shockwave, his beard flying in the air. His opponent, Nan Poyan, was even worse. His whole body shook violently. He only felt his ears buzzing and couldn't hear anything. He immediately took a step back. At the same time, he was scattered. Shui Leihan was an expert. How could he miss this opportunity? With a long roar, the Grand Orient sword pierced into Nan Poyan's heart like lightning. At the same time, he kicked Nan Poyan's body into the air. His whole body was torn into pieces in mid-air. Then Shui Leihan roared wildly. He raised his true chi again and his body turned into a huge sword light. He flew around the battlefield at lightning speed. Everywhere he passed, the experts of the Saint Emperor Palace who were scattered because of this huge shock wave splattered blood. They screamed and fell to the ground. How could Shui Leihan, who had experienced thousands of battles, let go of such a good opportunity to kill the enemy? The Grand Orient sword had killed more than 500 people in this short period of time. It was extremely glorious. When GMO Luo Kadi and the others saw that the crisis over Mo Qingwu and the other girls had been resolved, they also took this opportunity to rush back and kill. A total of 18 peak experts were like tigers released from their cages, crazily slashing and killing. At this moment, it was no longer a fight between 2 sides. It was a one-sided massacre. In this chaotic place, There were always experts of the Saint Emperor Palace who fell to the ground silently and died mysteriously, turning into a thread of true spirit. That was the Dark God's attack. Another loud sound rang out, and another mushroom cloud appeared. Chu Yang's calamity sword once again smashed against the mountain and river sword. The mountain and river sword let out a sharp sword cry, which carried a trace of humiliation and unwillingness. The calamity sword's cry filled the sky, as if it was responding. Only the two swords could communicate and feel. The mountain and river sword's humiliation and unwillingness weren't because it was inferior to the calamity sword. It was because of other reasons. Chu Yang only felt that his blood was boiling, and his fighting spirit was surging like never before. An unimaginably thick power was accumulating in his body, and he had no time to release it. Every time he clashed with the mountain and river sword to the limit, he would feel a wave of sobriety and comfort. And after that moment of comfort, it was followed by an even more bloated pain. He shouted as if he had gone mad. He slashed down one sword after another without any hesitation. There was no strategy at all. He just wanted to force you to fight head-on. Coincidentally, the Saint Monarch was also coincidentally in the same situation. The true spirits of the fallen experts of the Saint Emperor Palace were completely different from the ordinary 10,000 saints' true spirits. And so many of them had died suddenly. So many high-quality true spirits had entered the Saint Emperor's body almost at the same time. Even with the Saint Emperor's cultivation, he couldn't assimilate all of them for his own use. For a moment he was like Chu Yang. His vital energy was extremely abundant, exceeding the limit that his body could bear. He was also bloated more and more. Chapter 26:38. Otherwise, with the Saint Lord's battle experience, it was impossible for him not to see that Chu Yang was in a very subtle bad state at this moment. Fighting him head-on was the most unwise thing to do. As long as he fought with him, he wouldn't have to fight him head-on. He wouldn't even have to do it himself and he would self-destruct. It was just that the Saint Lord was in the same situation at this moment and also needed a channel to vent. Therefore, Chu Yang's head-on fight was exactly what the Saint Lord wished for. In such a special case situation, the two of them didn't care about the battle situation around them. They were like two mad bulls only knowing how to collide continuously. In fact, at this moment, the two of them were actually faintly afraid in their hearts. Damn it, please don't let this guy die before I'm done venting. That would be the real problem and it would be terrible. Therefore, every moment, every sword and every strike of the two of them gathered all the strength they could muster in their bodies. They intended to vent as much of the strength in their bodies as possible. As for other matters such as the exposure of the mastermind behind the 10,000 Saints' true spirit, or other life and death issues, at this moment they really couldn't care less. Only by overcoming this life and death crisis would they have the right to talk about other matters. Therefore they could only collide and collide. Then they would be repelled, retreat, advance again and collide again. Just like this, the two of them used the most extreme, most simple, and most barbaric method to launch an extreme collision. This kind of returning to the original battle mode, the surrounding people really couldn't interfere. Once they entered this shattered area, they would feel as if they were struck by lightning. Even super experts like the East Emperor Demon Empress were no exception. The power of the collision between the two of them had actually exceeded the level of the current Heaven Imperial Court. In view of this, everyone was more than happy to chase and kill the other experts from the Saint Emperor Palace. This time, there were a total of 4,000 to 5,000 experts from the Saint Emperor Palace who came with the Saint Lord. However, when facing these peak experts who were already at the peak of the Heaven Imperial Court, especially when facing such a large group of them at once, there was no way to fight back at all. This sword had blocked Luo Kudi's move with great difficulty. But Ji Mo's sword had already found a gap, and had pierced into his heart. There was clearly only one Mo Tianji in front of him. However, a viburnum flower behind him had already quietly drilled into his chest. As for the Eastern Emperor Demon Empress, she was like a tiger that had entered a flock of sheep as she unleashed a massacre. Rui Butong's nirvana flame burned fiercely. His entire person had turned into a huge and divine phoenix, swallowing and spitting out flames as he flew brilliantly in the sky. The only thing that could truly kill the myriad holiness celestial spirit was Rui Butong's nirvana flame. Even the Eastern Emperor's Grand Orient sword and the Demon Empress Demon King's hook paled in comparison. The archer god's arrows truly lived up to their reputation. His arrows never missed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One life after another was claimed. He was taken away just like that. Chu Lur waved her hands. Her cultivation at the pinnacle of the Saint realm and her incomparable poison were a perfect combination. She moved around the cruel battlefield as she pleased. Wherever he went, the enemies fell in droves. On the other hand, Mo Qingwu, Zi Xiecheng and the rest could only watch the battle. In fact, the four of them were also puzzled. Why did that strange light appear on his body just now? If it was just this strange light, it would have been fine. But why did it condense into a woman that he had never seen before? And the strangest thing was, this woman. Until now, she was still in a light screen and had not disappeared. Facing the messy battlefield, this peerlessly beautiful woman was shrouded in a faint layer of worry, and a kind of gratification that came from the bottom of her heart. This woman's gaze was admiring the vast expanse of greenery around her. Her eyes were full of nostalgia and joy. She was completely dismissive of the battlefield that was filled with war cries. It was as if the order she had just given had nothing to do with her. However, it was this poetic, dreamy, and ethereal woman who casually gave an order that became the fuse that led to the destruction of the Saint Emperor Palace. Boom, boom, boom. As the massacre continued, the number of experts from the Saint Emperor Palace decreased. However, the collision between Chu Yang and the Saint Emperor became more and more intense. The Mountain River Sword was indeed the #1 divine weapon in the Heavenly Imperial Court. It was not at a disadvantage in the continuous collision with the Calamity Sword. It was not inferior at all. The two swords maintained the same flickering light and the same sword aura. There was no sign of damage at all. Both of them seemed to have lost their temper. Neither of them was willing to change their moves. They just kept on colliding and fighting to the death without backing down. Chu Yang, whose eyes had already turned red, did not know that he had been hated by a ruthless character that he could not afford to offend at this moment. At this moment, in a pitch-black space within the Calamity Sword, a figure couldn't help but sway left and right. He constantly muttered angrily, "Motherfucker? Yeah. I'm going dizzy. These two damned bastards, this is a motherfucking sword. Don't you two bastards understand the principle of a sword being light and agile? This is a sword, not a machete and not a sledgehammer. Who the hell would do this? They're really unreasonable. I really want to rush out now and beat these two bastards up. They're shaking me to death. I'm really going to be angry. When will this fucking end? I've really had enough. Chiang, you bastard, I'll remember you. Just you wait, you old, you're not done yet, you're colliding again." Not to mention how dissatisfied and vengeful the guy with the sword was. Chu Yang and the Saint had already collided thousands of times. With the continuous collisions, no matter how fast the energy was replenished, the energy in the body was still not endless. Gradually, both of them vaguely felt that the energy was almost exhausted. They could control the remaining energy freely. Their arms were starting to feel sore and numb, and there seemed to be some strange feelings on their faces. Using his divine sense to check, he realized that his body was bleeding from all 7 orifices due to the continuous collisions. It seemed that he also had some serious internal injuries. It was only because his energy was abundant earlier that the internal injuries were not obvious. Now that his energy was greatly depleted, the injuries were gradually showing. Chu Yang's arms were trembling slightly, and the eyes of the Saint opposite him had already started to flicker, because just a moment ago, he realized that there was no sound around him. Only when he turned his head around did he realize how badly he had lost this time. There were more than 4,700 experts from the Saint Emperor's palace, and none of them were still alive. The one with the most serious injuries was the mighty god, one of the 5 gods of the fairy race. He was known for his strength and he walked the path of defeating 10 with 1 strength. He was the most seriously injured in this battle, and his whole body was covered in blood and flesh. However, he definitely did not suffer any fatal injuries. Fortunately, the fairy race did not have heavy elixirs. Otherwise, with 1 heavy elixir, his injuries would be healed in the blink of an eye, and he would be full of vigor. Seeing this scene, everyone, including the Saint Master Yun, clearly realized one thing: the Saint Emperor's palace. It's over. The Saint Master Yun, who had shocked the world for millions of years and was regarded as a god by everyone in the Heaven Imperial Court, would also gradually walk towards the end of his road after this moment. At this moment, the Saint Master was really close to breaking down. Even in his dreams, he would never have thought that he would weave such a perfect lie, drag the elf race into the water with him, and even create such a heaven-sent opportunity to kill Chu Yang. He was prepared to kill Shui Leihan, Demon Empress Chu Yang, and the others with such a meticulous plan. But things had developed so much, and the person who was tricked in the end was actually himself. Moreover, after this incident, The sage himself had realized that he had already been conned by this vicious scheme to the point where he was beyond redemption. Until now, he still hadn't truly understood where he had made a mistake. Why did the situation develop to such a bad state? This feeling almost drove the Saint Master crazy. Even with his cultivation, he was on the verge of collapsing at this moment. Chu Yang was panting, and the Saint Master opposite him was also panting like a cow. But unlike the Saint Master who was on the verge of breaking down, Chu Yang was very happy. Because he had already found a way to fuse the heavy elixir and eliminate the extreme backlash. And at this moment, Chu Yang's heart was filled with an indescribable excitement. Once upon a time, the only Saint Master who was above DE and the Empress was so unattainable. So unreachable. But now, he was facing the Saint Master head-on with his own strength, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. Although he had 15 super heavy elixirs, the Saint Master also had close to 5,000 high-level 10,000 Saints True Spirits to supplement him. In terms of the current situation, this battle was more or less evenly matched. Even the resources on the Saint Master's side were still at a considerable advantage. Shui Leihan stared at Chu Yang who was standing with his sword in a daze. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. From now on, the Heaven Imperial Court has once again a true, unparalleled expert. The Demon Empress sighed softly and said with certainty, "That's right. From today onwards, the history of the Heaven Imperial Court is about to be rewritten and enter a new era. And the source of all this is actually, because of these few little ones." Both of them were somewhat emotional. Before this, or when they had just met Chu Yang and the others, who would have thought that they would actually grow to such an extent in such a short period of time? Mo Qinji, Xia Danxiong, Shui Leihan, the Demon Empress, Chu Yang, GMO, Luo Kadi, and the rest as well as the 5 fairy gods, were all staring at Cloud Master fiercely. On the other hand, Cloud Master's side was completely and truly alone. So many peak-level masters surrounded Cloud Lord. Chapter 2639. But Cloud Master's expression didn't change. After that moment of near collapse, the saint had more than 1,000,000 years of experience after all. He instantly adapted to the terrible situation in front of him. The determination of his state of mind was evident. He panted lightly and looked around at the people around him. There was an abnormal flush on his face. He actually laughed and said, "Do you people think that I'm at the end of my rope now and will definitely lose? That I'm definitely going to die?" His smile was still as relaxed as ever. Shui Leihan said lightly, "We've never dared to underestimate a saint. No one dared to underestimate a saint. Even if the situation was good, who knew if the saint didn't have other trump cards? Since the saint could have 2 trump cards, the 10,000 Saints True Spirit and his doppelganger, would he have a 3rd trump card that no one knew about? Even if he died today, he could use his doppelganger to revive himself and rise again. Who would dare to underestimate such a person?" Jiang also laughed. "Before you're completely finished, no one will dare to underestimate you. But even if you don't die today, you'll have to peel off a layer of your skin here. We're quite confident about this." The saint sneered. "Peel off a layer of my skin? I'm afraid you people aren't qualified enough." "Then let's wait and see." Chu Yang sneered. His eyes flashed with undisguised killing intent. Shui Leihan looked at the saint seriously. Suddenly he took a step forward slowly and said, "Cloud Master, you're at the end of your rope today. In the future you won't have any right to deceive the world. I want to ask you something. You shouldn't be hiding anything. And since we're acquainted, I have to ask this question. If you don't understand, you'll always be loyal." Cloud Master said indifferently, "I know what you want to ask. Back then, I was the one who suggested gathering everyone to hunt down the 10,000 Saints True Devil. But before we did, I already knew that secret. So, do you understand now?" What Shui Leihan wanted to ask was precisely this. And when Shui Leihan opened his mouth, Cloud Master also guessed that Dong Huang was going to ask about this. Now that everything was out in the open, there was no point in denying it anymore. The saint who had always deceived the world with his lies. Today he finally spoke the truth for the first time. Because he also knew that if he missed this day, he would have died. There was no chance for him to say anything more. Especially. At this moment, Dong Huang and the others were still qualified. As expected, when the 10,000 Saints True Devil was besieged by everyone had always been on guard against the great devil masters coming to help. But in the end, not a single one of them appeared. "You're saying that you've already killed all of them?" Shui Leihan gritted his teeth. "So you've long subdued that person?" Master Cloud laughed. "Shui Leihan, your words are laughable and superfluous. If I didn't capture those people, How could I rebuild the 10,000 Saints True Spirit base? This kind of thing. In the end, it's best to have someone familiar with the task. Shui Leihan nodded and said, no one has ever known about your master's background. But now that I think about it, since you were able to successfully subdue the Great Devil and rebuild the 10,000 Saints Real Spirit base with such ease, you must be the younger brother of that 10,000 Saints Real Devil from back then, right? The reason why you proposed to gather everyone's strength to eliminate the myriad Saints True Devil was because you didn't want anyone to compete with you, even if that person was your teacher? Isn't that right? Master Cloud laughed loudly, but there was a hint of mockery in his voice. Shui Leihan, your brain is indeed very good, to be able to think of this in such a short time. But let me tell you, you're wrong. There's a fundamental blind spot in your thinking. Wrong? Blind spot? Shui Leihan couldn't help but be stunned. He frowned and said, please enlighten me. In his mind, after deducing bit by bit back then to come to such a conclusion, his confidence should not be wrong. But it was actually wrong? Did he still have a blind spot? A mocking and vicious smile appeared on Master Cloud's face. He pointed at Shui Leihan and said mockingly, you bunch of so-called righteous people, ha. The reason why you can succeed in today's battle is really because the heavens are blind. It's because you're as stupid as pigs and don't know what means are at all. Shui Leihan frowned. Suddenly, a thought flashed across his mind. He said in realization, could it be that you're actually, Master Cloud sneered? If I'm only the disciple of the myriad Saints True Devil, how would he let me go? He would definitely have refined me into the myriad Saints True Spirit long ago. You can't even think of this and you still want to be the Eastern Demon Empress. What a joke. Shui Leihan's eyes were cold. He sighed and said, I see. Master Cloud, you're really worse than pigs and dogs. GMO, who was at the side, asked in puzzlement, what do you mean by, I see? Mo Chinji pulled him from behind and stopped him from continuing. Mo Chinji's understanding was even before the Eastern Emperor's, but his reminder at this time was equivalent to confirming and mocking the Eastern Emperor's prestige and dignity. Shui Leihan smiled bitterly and shook his head. With a kind of disdain from the bottom of his heart, he said in a low voice, Master Cloud is not the disciple of the myriad Saints True Devil, but the son of the myriad Saints True Devil, his biological son. Everyone was greatly shocked. They looked at Master Cloud almost in disbelief. Back then, Master Cloud mobilized the entire world's power just to kill his own father? This was too inconceivable. There was actually such a despicable and heartless person in this world? Master Cloud laughed loudly, rocking back and forth. He said, not bad, not bad. At least you're not completely stupid. I was the son of the myriad Saints True Devil back then, and it's precisely because I was his son that he couldn't possibly cultivate me into the myriad Saints True Spirit. And only through his son would I know all the methods to cultivate the myriad Saints True Spirit. And only through his son would I be able to subdue all the great devil masters. His expression suddenly became violent and ferocious. All of you know now. Shocking, right? Ah. What a pity, all of you are already too late by more than 1,000,000 years. For these more than 1,000,000 years, all of you have been like a bunch of stupid pigs, toyed by me in the palm of my hand. Ah. Just thinking about it makes me feel very satisfied. He laughed loudly. All of you have spent so much effort to get rid of the myriad Saints True Devil, but all of you have become the subordinates of the myriad Saints True Devil. Ah. Don't you think it's funny? Don't you think it's ironic? A bunch of idiots. The Demon Empress laughed coldly. Ironic? Funny? Idiots? What we find funny is still only you. As a son, you actually gathered so many experts, plotted and schemed, cut off all reinforcements, and used all sorts of methods to kill your own biological father. Cloud Master, are you still a human? Cloud Master laughed crazily. Why not? With him around, I will never be able to truly grasp all the secrets, much less control all the powers. Even if he really rules over the Heaven Imperial Court, I will at most be a tie or even a one-tie. What's the point of having such a status? Furthermore, he doesn't even have the ambition to rule over the entire Heaven Imperial Court. All he wants is his own strength. How stupid is that? What's the point of having such a strong force and such a stupid thought when he dies? More importantly, I started to clear my name from the moment I started. At that time, I was already going to become the #1 person in the Heaven Imperial Court. But the only stain on my name is that I am the son of the myriad Saints True Devil. Although no one knows this secret, it is still like a thorn in my back, a bone in my throat. I am always worried that he will ask me to do something. And if I don't do it, he will expose my identity at any time. I am Cloud Master. I am the Cloud Master. How can I be suppressed like this? What do you know about this feeling of having your biggest secret suppressed by someone else? What do you know? Cloud Master roared with grief and indignation. If I don't kill him, what can I do? If I kill him, I can gain a good reputation and become the #1 hero in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Why can't I do something like this that will only bring me benefits and no harm? He is so evil. If I kill him, won't I be upholding justice? Why can't I kill him? And if I kill him, I can subdue the great Devil Master and have the secret of the myriad saints' true spirit. Why can't I kill him? He is my father. He gave birth to me, raised me, and cultivated me. In the end, he sacrificed himself for my great cause. What's wrong with that? Isn't this the right thing to do? Which father in the world doesn't sacrifice himself for his son? Why can't he? Why? Everyone looked at Cloud Master as if they were looking at a pile of shit. Their eyes were full of undisguised disgust and disdain. Before this, no one would have thought that there would be such a person in this world. So inhumane. He was so heartless. So infuriating. Killing one's own father was actually said to bring benefits and no harm. This kind of shameless argument made everyone explode in anger in an instant. Chu Yang said sternly, even if he is evil and heartless and can kill anyone in the world, you Cloud Master can't be killed. Because you are his son. Indeed, every father in the world is sacrificing himself for his son. But this doesn't mean that the son has no conscience. It also doesn't mean that the son has no conscience. Not to mention killing him. Cloud Master, you are worse than a dog. Mo Qinji was so angry that his face turned red. It is myriad saints' true devil's misfortune to have a son like you. Shui Leihan sighed and said, perhaps, this is myriad saints' true devil's retribution for all the evil he has done in his life. To die in the hands of his own son. If I don't kill him, can he live on? Don't you all still want to kill him? He has done so many evil things and yet he is so high profile. He will die sooner or later. Rather than die in your hands, I would rather he die in my hands. At least, he can still make some contributions to his own son. Cloud Master gritted his teeth. Shui Leihan, stop pretending. You are the real executioner. Chapter 2640. I killed my father. Do you feel good about it? Ah. Cloud Master said despicably, I'm not afraid to tell you that I actually feel very good too. He brought me to this world and I sent him away from this world. Isn't this the best repayment? Isn't this me sending him off in his old age? The Demon Empress turned her head away in disgust. Everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The words, sending him off in his old age, could actually be interpreted in such a way. This world was really big. There were weirdos every year but not as many as this year. Faced with such shameless words and coming from the mouth of Cloud Master, the saint who had been the most powerful person in the world for 1,000,000 years, everyone felt especially intolerable. You even dared to kill your own father. You were even willing to kill him. And you did it without any guilt at all. Shui Leihan's eyes were filled with deep sorrow. He said softly, then it's no wonder that you would kill your own father-in-law and swallow the assets of someone who had done you a great favor. Cloud Master, you're really a piece of trash, a complete piece of trash. Cloud Master frowned and said angrily, what are you saying? Shui Leihan's eyes were cold. He said, I'm saying, you're a complete piece of trash. Cloud Lord chuckled. Trash? In this world, who isn't trash? Cloud Master looked up and laughed. Who didn't grow up from a piece of trash? For example, you and Chu Yang. In the beginning, weren't you just a piece of trash? Or rather, an ant. But even though you've grown until now, you're still trash. In this lifetime, you'll always be trash. Shui Leihan's lips were a little green. At this moment, Shui Leihan thought of his Shui clan. It was all because of this person in front of him. Disintegrated. But this person was actually such a despicable person. His father, brothers, family, little sister. Their lives were all ruined by this person. The anger in Shui Leihan's heart at this moment was really incomparable. Suddenly, a sword light flashed. Cloud Master. Today you and I will fight to the death. Cloud Master dodged, tilting his head and smiling. You seem to hate me a lot? What? Did I kill your whole family and rape your sister? Shui Leihan. I don't understand. You've always been against me. What enmity do I have with you? Shui Leihan's eyes widened, his chest heaving up and down. But he still said, let me ask you. What exactly happened to the purple cloud heavens back then? Cloud Master laughed loudly. Don't you know the reason? You were there many times back then. Zihao threatened me so many times back then. That bastard, am I someone he can threaten? How dare you threaten me to not enter the Shui clan? How dare you threaten me not to marry Shui Xian? He actually threatened to kill me. Ah, can he kill me? In the end, didn't I kill him? He laughed complacently. I've used a little trick and I've made that bastard Zihao die an unnatural death. He died with everlasting regret. He looked up to the sky and howled, in the Heaven Imperial Court. No one can threaten me. No. There wasn't one in the past and there wouldn't be one in the future. You Shui Leihan. You Yao Xinera, you Chuyang, all of you and all of you will die. Not a single one of them can live. He looked up to the sky and roared as if he had gone mad. The look in his eyes became ruthless and violent, flashing with a faint black light. But he was obviously laughing happily. Yes, he didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt for everything he had done. There was only joy. Shui Leihan calmed down at once. You've used a little trick? The saint panted heavily and laughed strangely. That's right. Back then your cultivation had already reached a bottleneck and couldn't break through for a long time. Then didn't you get a firmament technique? That secret manual is good stuff. It's your opportunity to break through the bottleneck, right? Then you went into seclusion. And you couldn't come out even after you went into seclusion. Even if I forcefully interrupted you, it's impossible, right? Ah. Shui Leihan felt cold all over. You, the saint laughed wildly, rocking back and forth. That secret manual was given to you by me. The restriction inside was also set up by me. Ah. Shui Leihan, do you really think you've discovered an ancient relic? Do you really think you're so lucky? Ah. What a joke. The Great East Sovereign, ha. Shui Leihan's face was ashen. So, that seclusion he went into seclusion back then was a scheme of the saint. After you got the firmament technique, I immediately informed the extraterrestrial demons. Zi Shaotian and Zi Hao completely lost the help of the outside world. The saint, Venerable Master Yun, no longer had any scruples and said everything. These were obviously the things he was proud of in his life and had always been buried in his heart. He had long felt that he was going to go crazy from holding it in. He actually didn't share such a proud thing with anyone. Wasn't that casting pearls before swine? Walking in the dark? Now that all his identities and secrets had been exposed, there was no point in hiding them anymore. Moreover, after today he, the only saint, would probably become a rat despised by everyone in the Heavenly Imperial Court. By then there wouldn't be a chance to say anything anymore. He might as well say it all out today. No matter what, he could still be happy. To let others know about his proud things, especially to see their regretful expressions, was what the saint looked forward to the most. As expected, he wasn't disappointed. I told the extraterrestrial demons that Zi Shaotian already had no roots. Moreover, this was the most suitable place for them. If they succeeded, the other heavens and earth in the Heavenly Imperial Court wouldn't join forces to encircle and annihilate them. Those extraterrestrial demons indeed sent troops to invade Zi Shaotian. Venerable Master Yun's face, which had always been calm and peaceful, was now filled with extreme evil, insidious and poisonous. Then, during the war, I personally rushed to Zi Shaotian and told Zi Hao an important piece of information. The extraterrestrial demons invaded this time because they wanted to fight a decisive battle and dominate the entire Heavenly Imperial Court. Our Heavenly Imperial Court was actively preparing for war. Once the time was right, we would launch a decisive battle with the extraterrestrial demons. But, before the time was right, we needed Zi Hao to hold on. The saint's words made everyone sigh. With Zi Hao's heroic spirit, how could he take a step back after knowing such a thing? He was destined to hold on until the last moment. But when he finally understood that all this was the saint's scheme, everything was too late. Even if he wanted to retreat, it was already too late. Because there were already so many brothers who had died in the battle at Purple Cloud Heavens. Only because he believed the words of a villain. Even if he had the ability to escape, he would definitely not stay out of it. Therefore, the tragedy of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor was destined just like that. At that time, it was already impossible to change. There were provisions for the internal affairs and no reinforcements for the external affairs. During that period of time, all the big worlds were in chaos, to the extent that the people had no way of making a living. Did you think that those were all coincidences? Ah, those were all caused by me. Zi Hao is indeed amazing. The saint chuckled. I originally thought that it would take at most a year's time for the entire Purple Cloud Heavens to fall. But I didn't expect that Zi Hao actually held on for as long as a year. Just a little bit more and he could hold on until you, Shui Leihan, came out of seclusion. But in the end you still didn't come out in time. The saint laughed maniacally. Aren't you sworn brothers with Zihao? Aren't you good brothers who entrusted their lives to each other? Why didn't you appear when your brothers died? Shueleihan ha. Even if you hate me, what can you do? For these 1,000,000 years, you wanted to kill me every moment, but did you manage to do it? Perhaps today is the closest you've ever been to your goal, but you only managed to do it by relying on the help of many outsiders. Is this your ability? You remember your brother's revenge, but you're destined to never be able to avenge them. You'll never be able to avenge them. The saint's maniacal laughter was like sharp awls piercing into Shueleihan's heart. My brother's revenge. No revenge for 1,000,000 years. Only now did the truth come to light. Shueleihan looked at Zi Sheqing with a gaze full of guilt. The saint's gaze also followed and looked over. He couldn't understand why Shueleihan would look at this young girl with such guilt. Zi Sheqing said proudly, Uncle Shui, you don't have to blame yourself. My father died protecting Purple Cloud Heavens. That was his territory in the first place, where his responsibility lay. I can feel that my father still had no regrets in that great battle until his death. For the sake of Purple Cloud Heavens, he was worth it. As for Uncle Shui not being able to go because you were tricked, you can only blame Cloud Lord for being too despicable. The main culprit is Cloud Lord, only a despicable person like him. This piece of trash has nothing to do with Uncle Shui. The brotherhood between Uncle Shui and my father is clear as day. No one can change it. Zi Sheqing said resolutely. Shueleihan's beard trembled. For a moment he actually felt hot in his heart, almost glistening with tears. The saint was suddenly tongue-tied. He looked at Zi Sheqing as if he had seen a ghost. You're actually Zihao's daughter? In that instant he felt his mind go blank. He really didn't expect that the heavenly emperor of Purple Cloud Heavens, Zihao, actually left behind a daughter when the entire army of Purple Cloud Heavens was wiped out. I'll let you know. The demon empress stared at Cloud Lord with extreme disgust. This child in front of you is the daughter of the heavenly emperor of Purple Cloud Zihao and sister Ling Piaoping. She's also the only direct descendant of the heavenly emperor of Purple Cloud left in this world. Heaven always blesses kind people, but it definitely won't bless a beast like you. Back then you caused the destruction of the heavenly emperor of Purple Cloud's family. Now, the daughter of the heavenly emperor of Purple Cloud has personally witnessed your fall from grace. This can be considered as karma. The demon empress said coldly, this also proves that Cloud Lord, your path has come to an end. Today it's time for you to repay the blood debt. Cloud Lord, surrender yourself. I always thought that the 1st of August would be the gathering of comrades. I didn't expect that the few of us would set the gathering to be today. I was scolded just now. I'll go quickly. I'll come back tonight and write my story according to the situation. Chapter 2641. Master Yun's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Zi Sheqing. Suddenly, the look in his eyes slowly changed from shock and disbelief to viciousness and malevolence. So, Zihao actually still has a bastard child left in this world. Forget it, let me end his life completely today and let him live in regret in the afterlife. The demon empress Dong Huang and all his brothers stepped forward at the same time. The 5 fairy gods' eyes also turned sharp instantly. Now, the illusion of the fairy empress was related to the white light on Zi Sheqing. This bastard actually wanted to destroy Zi Sheqing? Wasn't this equivalent to destroying the last trace of the fairy empress? They had to kill him even if they had to risk their lives. The archer god's bow was fully drawn. This arrow was different from all the previous ones. The archer god had even fused his life and soul into the arrow. This was an arrow that risked his life. In front of me, who dares to hurt my baby, my Qiong Xiao? The dark god's figure disappeared again. Obviously, he had returned to the darkness and was ready to launch a fatal attack. At this moment, all 5 of the elven gods were bristling with rage. As long as the Cloud Master dared to move, they would dare to risk their lives. Cloud Master, you're courting death. Chuyang snorted coldly. You? Are you worthy? Kill. The Cloud Master suddenly jumped up. With a shake of his body, he and his sword turned into thousands of rays of light and rushed toward Zi Sheqing. Break. The archer god shouted and spat out a mouthful of blood. He had launched his ultimate arrow. The moonlight in the sky followed the release of this arrow. It suddenly shone brightly. Puff 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 puff. The archer god's arrow pierced through the countless illusions and rays of light created by the saint. The next moment, the saint shouted. His body, which was moving at full speed, suddenly flashed and twisted. He actually appeared in the sky far away. There was a transparent hole on his shoulder, The archer god's arrow actually injured his actual body in the almost endless illusions. This was something that was almost impossible to do. Yet the fairy archer god did it. The archer god spat out blood and lay on the ground. He could no longer move. But his arrow that risked his life. However, he had already severely injured Cloud Master. Almost at the same time, Shui Leihan's Grand Orient sword flew up like a rainbow. Chu Yang's Calamity sword also turned into a ray of flowing light. The Demon Empress Demon King Hook also scattered demonic aura all over the sky. Xie Danxiong's Jasper Flower Heaven suddenly bloomed. Rui Butong's Nirvana Flame burned the world. Mo Qinji's Purple Jade Flute covered the sky and covered the earth. GMO and Luo Kadi became one with their swords. Everyone attacked with all their might. Another illusory figure appeared beside the sage. It was the elf dark god who was attacking with all his might. As for the other three fairy gods, they turned into three streams of light and charged forward. All the experts reappeared at the same time as the Cloud Lord's arrow. Launch a counterattack. There was only one goal. The only holy monarch, Cloud Lord. Cloud Lord attacked Zi Xiecheng. This was tantamount to crossing everyone's bottom line. No matter who he attacked, he might not be able to create such an effect. But his target was Zi Xiecheng. In fact, Cloud Lord didn't expect that Zi Xiecheng was closely related to everyone present at this moment. The Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor's daughter that he wanted to kill was now the incarnation of the Fairy Empress, Chu Yang's wife, Tribulation's sister-in-law, and the East Emperor Demon Empress niece. Once he moved, the East Emperor Demon Empress, the Elf race, and Tribulation's brothers all started to fight with all their might. The sage who was surrounded by countless attacks frantically dodged, counterattacked, and escaped. But in this short period of time, he had been attacked by so many experts at the same time. How could he not be flustered? In this world, he believed that there was no one who could block so many attacks at the same time in an orderly manner. At least only the sage Cloud Lord couldn't. With such attacks, not to mention one Cloud Lord, even if there were two more Cloud Lords, they would definitely not be able to block it. This time, it was as if Cloud Lord had provoked the craziest hornet's nest in this world. Even though he was the #1 expert in the world, he was still in a very sorry state. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Cloud Lord howled miserably at the sky. Amidst the frenzied parries, dodges, and chaotic movements, GMO let out a cry of agony and was the first to be sent flying. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, but his sword had already been left on Guru Yun's body. Luo Kadi and GMO both coughed up blood and retreated at almost the same time. Luo Kadi's sword was still in his hand, but before he retreated, he left behind a gaping wound that was half a foot long on the great sage's body, so deep that his bones could be seen. The East Emperor watched the battle and looked for a chance to enter. Without any hesitation, he clashed with Cloud Lord's palm. Both of them spat out blood at the same time and leaned back. Xie Danxiong's Viburnum flower took the opportunity to bloom on Cloud Lord's back. The Viburnum flower emperor retreated after she succeeded. She wasn't greedy and didn't suffer any counterattacks. There was also a strange snake-shaped weapon that pierced through Cloud Lord's thigh. However, the owner of the snake-shaped weapon, the Dark Deity, wasn't as lucky as Xie Danxiong. He took a kick and was sent flying. The Demon King's hook forced the mountain and river sword away. The Demon Empress Snow White palm struck out and smashed onto Cloud Lord's chest like a huge hammer. Cloud Lord suffered another heavy blow. He screamed and retreated desperately. He borrowed the force of the attack and tried to break free from the Demon Empress attacks. However, the group of people in the air didn't want to let up. They entangled with each other and rolled out for thousands of feet in an instant. Chu Yang's Calamity sword finally found an opportunity. With one strike, it chopped off one of Cloud Lord's shoulders. However, the moment that arm fell off, it swayed in the wind and turned into another Cloud Lord. His face was the same as before. He pounced forward fiercely and used his body to block the Calamity sword. Such a strange technique was truly shocking. After a part of the body left the body, it could turn into his own appearance to block the Calamity? This was undoubtedly another trump card of the Saint Lord. Chu Yang didn't slow down or hesitate. He swung the Calamity sword no less than 1,000 times. The devouring power was also activated at the same time. Fortunately, the Cloud Lord formed by the arm looked exactly the same as Cloud Lord. The power that it could unleash wasn't high. Not only was it far inferior to Cloud Lord himself, but it couldn't even compare to the clone. Chu Yang attacked fiercely with the Calamity sword. With the help of the devouring power, this clone was cut into pieces in an instant. Chu Yang was afraid that there would be more trouble in the future. He poured a lot of energy into the Calamity sword, and the sword energy became even more intense. He vaporized all the fragments and turned them into nothingness. He didn't expect to hit the jackpot. This vaporized state was even more beneficial for the devouring power of the Calamity Sword. It devoured the Saint Lord's severed arm and replenished a lot of energy. It greatly replenished Chu Yang's energy that was about to be depleted. Mo Qianji's purple jade flute turned into a purple ocean. Finally, he tapped Cloud Lord's forehead with the flute. A bloody hole immediately appeared on Cloud Lord's forehead. It was a shocking sight. Mo Qianji rarely attacked, but when he did, he would definitely succeed. This was especially so at this moment. However, while he succeeded, Cloud Lord's counterattack was also fierce. His remaining arm struck Mo Qianji's chest 3 times in a row. However, the moment Mo Qianji retreated, blood spurted out of his mouth. Cloud Lord's right eye had already been blinded by the purple jade flute. The arrow god shot another arrow, and it pierced through Cloud Lord's back. This arrow was the arrow god's soul-chasing arrow. It was extremely vicious and deadly. Cloud Lord attacked fiercely again. He suddenly roared, and his broken body suddenly exploded. He cried out in extreme pain, "I will definitely take revenge for today." Before he finished speaking, there was a sudden boom. His entire body turned into smoke that filled the sky. The smoke billowed all the way to the north. Chu Yang's Calamity Sword, Xue Leihan's Grand Orient Sword, the Demon Empress's Demon King Hook, and Xie Danxiong's Viburnum Flower all shot into the sky at the same time. They tried their best to surround and suppress the smoke that filled the sky. The 4 experts started to wipe out the smoke together. At this moment, another streak of red light flew over like lightning. It was Mo Qingwu's Qingwu Dream Saber. However, there seemed to be other colors on the Qingwu Dream Saber this time. It was Chu Lure's poison that attacked together with Mo Qingwu's saber. The 5 divine weapons unleashed their own characteristics at the same time, and the smoke dissipated instantly. A scream seemed to come from the depths of one's soul. In the next moment, a strong wind rose from the ground, and a streak of smoke shot into the sky. Then, with a boom, it turned into air. However, the Calamity Sword still flew into the sky, relentlessly chasing after it. Smack! A streak of light fell from the sky. An extremely furious shout came from the void. It was Cloud Lord's voice. The clouds in the sky dissipated in all directions. The wind swept away the clouds, leaving no trace. Cloud Lord's body disappeared just like that. Only one streak of light fell straight from the sky. With a clang, it landed on a huge rock. The huge rock couldn't withstand the heavy blow and instantly shattered. It was a sword that fell from the sky. Apart from shattering the rock, it was still stuck in the ground shakily. Although only half of it was exposed, it was still shining brightly. It was the weapon that I, Cloud Lord, had never let go of in my life. The Mountain River Sword. The number 1 divine weapon in the Imperial Court. This sword was also the only divine weapon that could collide with the Calamity Sword and remain unscathed. The number 1 divine weapon in the Imperial Court lived up to its name. This battle had actually caused Master Cloud's personal weapon to be lost here. Looking at this sword, Xue Leihan and the Demon Empress both had complicated expressions. Besides being the number 1 divine weapon in the Imperial Court, this sword was also the symbol of supreme power in the Imperial Court. The Mountain River Sword. It represented loyalty, the Imperial Court, the mountains and rivers, and the human heart. However, such a divine weapon, which was supposed to be the embodiment of justice and justice, had fallen into the hands of people like Master Cloud for over 1,000,000 years. This is the Mountain River Sword? GMO walked over curiously. The number 1 weapon in the Imperial Court? Don't touch this sword. Xue Leihan hurriedly reminded him. Before he finished speaking, the Mountain and River Sword shook violently. Then a cloud of snow-white smoke flowed out from the sword. A desolate voice that seemed to be filled with endless sorrow and disappointment sighed, Wuxia has been oppressed for too long. How can he still have the face to exist in this world? Chapter 2642. Then the smoke suddenly dispersed, turning into thousands of thin wisps of smoke and dissipating in the air. Pa 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 pa. Just like that, the Mountain and River Sword swayed, but starting from the hilt, it started to crack inch by inch. Gradually, this number 1 divine sword that had shaken the heavens and symbolized supreme power for millions of years turned into fine powder just like that. A pile of metal scraps. That sigh seemed to sound in everyone's hearts. The moment the Mountain and River Sword shattered, Xue Leihan and the others clearly felt a sense of guilt from the Mountain and River Sword itself. The heroic spirits that had existed in the Mountain and River Sword for millions of years finally dissipated. They were very guilty and very angry. As the symbol of justice, the representative of justice, as the supreme existence, they were used by such a despicable and shameless person for so long. With this thought, these heroic spirits would rather destroy themselves and not return to the world. To thank the world. From now on, there will be no supreme symbol of power in the world anymore. There will be no more mountain and river sword. A desolate voice sounded faintly. Then the sound of wind suddenly rose. Everyone only felt their vision clear up. The mountain and river sword was destroyed, and the heroic spirit of the sword also destroyed itself out of shame and regret, dissipating from the world. The East Emperor and the Demon Empress had deep gazes. Both of them bowed deeply at the same time, bidding farewell to the heroic spirit. At the same time they let out a long sigh. Imo-Chenji muttered, "From now on, there will be no more supreme symbol of power in the world, no more mountain and river sword." "You seem to have understood something," he said softly. "If there really is no such power in the world, if there really is no such symbol, for the Celestial Imperial Court this might not be a bad thing, right?" Everyone fell silent upon hearing this. Regarding this question no one could say for sure. But their hearts. They all felt a heartfelt sense of pity. Divine weapons had spirits and also self-esteem. He was unwilling to be controlled by others, and even more unwilling to be used by bad people for so long. In order to prove his innocence, in order to prove something, he was determined to destroy himself. A sword was already like this. Where was he? But no matter what. After this battle, Cloud Master's vitality was undoubtedly greatly damaged. His physical body was almost completely destroyed. And this time it was his main body that was injured. The injuries that originated from the body were definitely not something that could be healed in a short period of time. And his divine weapon, the Mountain River Sword, was no longer in his hands. This was equivalent to reducing his strength. Once again it was greatly weakened. If he were to encounter it again in the future, the danger would definitely be reduced by a lot, right? Thinking of this, everyone was more or less relieved. Immediately send a message to the world and announce to the Heavenly Imperial Court that only our sage monarch, Master Yun, will be witnessed by the Eastern Sovereign, the Demon Empress, Emperor Mo, and the 5 gods of the elf race. They will confirm that he is the master behind the myriad holy true spirit. As for his identity, he is the son of the previous generations. Myriad saints true devil. The Demon Empress immediately thought of this and said, when facing such an evil person, the Demon Empress will not be able to escape. Everyone in the entire Heaven Imperial Court has the right to punish him. Not bad. Shui Leihan immediately came to a realization. He looked at Xie Danxiong and said, this time, other than the people here, we also need to announce to the world at the same time that we're removing the title of the saint. The Demon Empress looked at Imo-Tianji. Imo-Tianji rubbed his nose and said with a smile, I can guarantee that all 10 worlds will know about this news at the same time. Furthermore, I can guarantee that before Master Yun continues to confuse right and wrong, even if he tries to quibble, it'll be useless. The Demon Empress was a little surprised. After the Archer God pointed out that Master Yun is the myriad holy true spirit and confirmed the evidence. I've already spread this news. At this moment, it might have already spread to the various branches of the intelligence department. Imo-Chenji smiled and said, therefore, I believe that before Master Yun reaches home, he will realize that he's no longer the number 1 person in Heaven Imperial Court. He's just a rat crossing the street and has no chance to fight back. Shui Leihan and the Demon Empress were both stunned. You spread the news before the battle ended? Of course, I had to spread the news as soon as possible. Imo-Chenji said, I think the Chenji Intelligence Department, which is closer to this place, has already started to announce this to the world. In another 6 hours at most, there won't be any major force in the entire Imperial Court that doesn't know about this matter, including the Purple Cloud Heavens. The muscles on Shui Leihan's face twitched. This guy is really ruthless. Furthermore, I also vaguely reminded that the entire world should boycott the Holy Emperor Palace. There are rumors that any forces that don't boycott the Holy Emperor Palace may be his subordinate forces. Imo-Chenji grinned and said, therefore, I reckon that at this moment, many of the branches of the Holy Emperor Palace should have already been smashed into pieces. The closer the original forces of the Holy Emperor Palace are to this place, the faster they'll be destroyed. The corners of the Demon Empress' eyes also twitched. This guy Imo-Chenji is really very dangerous. He's always done everything in advance. There's no need for anyone to say anything. Everything is under his control. Everything is perfect and flawless. When Shui Leihan raised his head, he realized that the 5 elven gods were no longer beside him. Chuyang was also rushing back. On the battlefield just now, the 4 rays of light were still shining. Everyone's heart skipped a beat and they all rushed back. They saw that the battlefield had already been cleaned up by the 5 elven gods. So many corpses and blood that flowed like a river just now were nowhere to be seen. Even, the whole place was already filled with fresh flowers, like a sea of flowers. Mo Qingwu and the other 3 girls were standing in the center. In midair, the figure of the elven empress was still there. She looked at the southern sky forest with a gaze full of longing and reluctance, as if she was full of endless emotions. Qiong Shao. The archer god's voice was trembling. You're finally willing to come back and take a look? The elven empress' eyes were actually a little dazed at this moment, because everyone was looking at her, including Chu Yang. No one dared to be sure. Was this elven empress who suddenly appeared just a projection of her divine soul without consciousness? Or was it a barely remaining divine soul doppelganger? The elven empress turned her head and locked her gaze on Chu Yang's face. All of a sudden, a smile like a spring flower appeared on her face. The elven emperor's seal on Chu Yang's forehead jumped again and gradually appeared. When the elven emperor's seal appeared, the elven empress' eyes became lively. Her body also became more solid. I'm sorry, Grandpa Archer God. The elven empress bowed slightly to the archer god. Sob sob sob. The archer god of the elven race whose name shook the world. At this moment he actually burst into tears. Qiongshao, you've been away for so many years and the first thing you say to me after you come back is I'm sorry? The elven empress' eyes glistened with tears. They were glistening. Grandpa Archer God, I don't have much time left. I want to say as much as I can. My current form may seem like a physical body. In fact, it's just a trace of consciousness that I left behind back then. I'm going to leave after saying what I want to say. The elven empress' voice was so weak that it made people want to comfort her involuntarily. The archer god sobbed and stopped asking. The others were also very curious. What exactly was going on? Fortunately, the elven empress didn't have any requests to listen. When she saw everyone gather around, she didn't express any objections. So everyone listened together. Back then, I comprehended the laws of the elves. The elven empress began to speak softly. Everyone was listening attentively. When I was halfway through comprehending, I suddenly felt a little dispirited. The elven empress smiled bitterly. I realized that, although I'm an elf and the elven empress, I'm still a woman after all. So, I wanted to find a home that belonged to me, and that beautiful dream. So, I took the divine book of the elves and left the elven forest to come to the human world. However, I looked around and saw all the heroes in the world, but none of them caught my eye. The elven empress nodded apologetically at Shui Leihan. Her gaze was full of apology, obviously saying that Dong Huang, you're already very outstanding, but I didn't take a fancy to you. It's really not that you're not good enough, it's just that you didn't meet my expectations. Shui Leihan touched his nose very awkwardly. You're really too polite. You didn't take a fancy to me. Are you embarrassed? But when I nodded, why did I suddenly feel like I've become trash? Do you know how much helplessness I've endured? You saved me a lot of trouble. Finally, one day when I was comprehending the divine book of the elves in the land of thunder and rain, it seemed like a voice suddenly said something to me. There was an incomprehensible confusion on the elven empress' delicate little face. This voice said, Qiong Shao can't dance with the wind and clouds, the world of pride is in the heavens, the path of purity in this life is clear, and there will be a good marriage in the next life. The elven empress said, these 4 sentences have a mysterious origin. I never understood it, so I kept thinking about it. Then I finally understood. Qiong Shao can't dance with the wind and clouds. Yes, I'm Qiong Shao, but I can't dance with the wind and clouds because the wind and clouds are on me. So, someone needs to dance with the wind and clouds above the Qiong Shao. And this is a human, not an elf. The world of pride is in the heavens. I once thought, is the heavens the short name of the heavens? But I didn't get anything until later. I accidentally learned from Dong Huang. There's actually another world in this world called the Heavens Continent. So that's the so-called heavens. The elven empress bowed to Shui Leihan. She was grateful for his guidance. But the god of archery and the other 5 elven gods looked at Shui Leihan fiercely as if they wanted to swallow him whole. Shui Leihan swallowed his saliva and thought, when did I tell you about the Heavens Continent? No matter how he thought about it, he still couldn't remember. The third sentence, the path of purity in this life, meant that I'm destined to be lonely in this life, right? The elven empress looked at Zi Sheqing and the others with yearning and envy in her eyes. she said, but the fourth sentence pushed the good marriage to the next life. Chapter 2643. No, no, no. I searched all the way and left the heavenly imperial court. I don't know how long I walked, but I found that I really went to the heavenly continent. What surprised me was that there were actually elves on this continent, but they were very weak. I lived on this continent and united the elves. Sometimes I thought to myself, with my cultivation, which is considered a master in the heavenly imperial court, what kind of danger could I encounter on this continent? I'm almost immortal, so what's the point of this life and the afterlife? At this point, the elven empress smiled bitterly. Finally, one day, that sword appeared. The elven empress looked at the calamity sword in Chu Yang's hand. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Shui Leihan smiled bitterly. Sure enough, the root of the problem was back to the calamity sword. Actually, it was natural. With the elven empress's strength at the peak of the heavenly imperial court, she would be invincible in the heavenly continent without even needing to fight. If it wasn't for the calamity sword and its owner, how could there be an accident? The 5 elven gods also fixed their gazes on the calamity sword in Chu Yang's hand, with different expressions. Obviously, they didn't know what this sword had to do with what the elven empress said. That day, the heavenly continent suddenly collapsed without any warning. It was a catastrophic destruction that caused the most direct and complete destruction to the entire world and the entire plane. Then, someone used heaven-defying means to directly fold and reshape the heavenly continent. Until now, the means used by that mighty person are still completely beyond my understanding of power or my survival instinct. And the last struggle of not wanting my fellow elves to die in front of me, I tried my best to lead all the elves to avoid the disaster, whether it was intentional or not. Anyway, that mighty person with heaven-defying abilities settled all the elves in a slightly more stable place. I can say with certainty that if it wasn't for that person's help, all the elves, including me, would have perished in that world-ending disaster. We were collectively settled in that new place and we thought that the disaster was over. We thought that we could start a new life, but we didn't expect that the world would collapse again, and the end of the world would come again. The scale of this world-ending disaster was much smaller than the previous one. However, it was still not something that could be resisted by humans. Just as I was about to bring the elf race away from there and return to heaven's imperial court, I realized that the chaos of creation could no longer be reversed. At least, there was nothing I could do about it. A voice that sounded like a sigh said to me, "I've ruined your present life, so I'll return you an afterlife." The elves were never spared. The entire race was annihilated, and I was only able to preserve the place where the elves lived, the city of elves. However, the spring of life that represents the reproduction of the elves has finally dried up. All of this represents the end. The elven empress voice was filled with exhaustion. Or perhaps there can be no construction without destruction. Anyway, it was at that time that I suddenly had an epiphany. I understood what I wanted. So I dispersed all of my cultivation to protect the lifeline of the Sky Elf clan. I dispersed the Elf Emperor's seal and only kept the last bit of my life. In the land of slumber. On that day I made an oath to the world. If anyone brings the spring of life to my place of slumber and brings light to the elven race, and brings hope to the elven race, I will bestow the Elven Emperor's seal to him. Until one day, I suddenly woke up in the land of eternal slumber. I didn't know about my afterlife, but I also didn't dream about those beautiful women anymore. Because after experiencing life and death, all of this seems so absurd. But finally one day this person came. His name is Chu Yang. He brought his sword and the spring of life to bring hope and light to the elves. Actually, at that time the Elf Emperor's seal was already restless, and I also gave my approval. When I saw this person, I seemed to have a feeling. It seems that I've been waiting for him for a very, very long time. Or perhaps, it should be said that my slumber was to wait for his arrival. Now, the time that I've been waiting for is already in this life and the afterlife. Finally, the time that I've been waiting for has come, but it's already impossible for my life to recover. If I had met you in my youth back then, I would definitely have married you and become your most adorable wife. When the Elven Empress said this, her eyes looked deeply at Chu Yang. The tenderness in her eyes was boundless and undisguised. Chu Yang suddenly felt a sense of absent-mindedness and bitterness. Tears were already streaming down the faces of the 5 elven gods. We only knew that the elves stood aloof from worldly affairs and blindly let the elves live in seclusion. But we didn't know that such seclusion was actually equivalent to sealing off the human nature of the elves. Regardless of whether it's a human or an elf, when they're hungry they have to eat. When they're thirsty they have to drink water. When they're young, regardless of whether they're male or female, They all yearn for a love that belongs to them. The Elven Empress sighed softly. In the future, don't use external forces to control this kind of thing. Otherwise, the elves will be destroyed in this world sooner or later. Yes, the 5 elven gods replied in unison. The moment I saw him, I knew that it was already impossible for me. The so-called present life and the afterlife were nothing more than an obsession. And this person already had his lover long ago. So, I turned my soul into the purest creation primordial energy in the world, divided it into 4, and bestowed them to his wives respectively. At the end of my obsession, I've actually truly understood. I finally know what the so-called love feels like. There was satisfaction in the Elven Empress expression. When this last bit of my consciousness dissipates, I'll truly disappear from this world. The only thing that makes me feel gratified is that before my final disappearance, I've finally returned to my hometown. I've seen my long-lost kin again, and I have no more regrets in this life. The Elven Empress looked around her, full of longing. At this point, even Chuyang, Shuelehan and the others felt a sense of sorrow. This Elven Empress, who looked weak and lovely, had never done any evil deeds in her life. She had devoted her entire life to the elves, whether it was the elves in the heavens or the elves in the heavens. As an empress, her greatest wish was to be able to marry and experience the taste of love like an ordinary woman. However, such an extremely ordinary wish was filled with twists and turns. From the beginning to the end, she still hadn't achieved it. Even if she said that she had tasted it now, it was only because she felt the same way and enjoyed the feelings of Zisheching and the others. Now, this wisp of her soul was about to dissipate and enter the path of eternal silence. It was a pity that no matter how emotional they were, they couldn't help it all. Because the Elven Empress in front of them was only a wisp of her consciousness, the last bit of her life force. The Elven Empress calmly looked at Chuyang. Her eyes were filled with boundless tenderness. She even smiled and said, "I really envy the 4 of them. So, I gave them my truest and purest wishes. You can rest assured that I haven't affected their minds from the beginning to the end. They are them and I am me. I'm only me." This sentence was a little vague and even a little incoherent. However, Chuyang understood, really understood. "I understand. Thank you very much." The Elven Empress smiled a little warmly and a little sadly. "You're welcome. Actually, I should be the one thanking them. After following them, I finally understood what kind of feelings it is for a woman to fall in love with a man. It turns out that this is the most wonderful feeling in the world." She gazed at Chuyang and said, "And a man like you who cares and cares for them in every possible way is even more intoxicating and mesmerizing. Chuyang, I actually fell in love with you too. If there's a next life, I'll marry you, okay?" Everyone was silent for a while. This included Mo Qingwu, Zisheching and the other 2 girls. Logically speaking, a woman had suddenly appeared here and wanted to marry Chuyang. Logically speaking, they should be extremely jealous and glaring angrily at that woman. But now at this moment they only felt a heartfelt sadness. How pitiful was this woman? Who could reject such an excessive request? At this moment, Chuyang was also a little sad but also a little amused. Now he had basically reached the realm of immortality. If he could go one step further, he would even reach the realm of immortality. If that was the case, how could he have a next life? Seeing that Chuyang didn't give an answer for a long time, the Elven Empress' eyes gradually dimmed. She said dejectedly, "Forget it." The 5 elven gods stared at Chuyang with murderous eyes. Each of them looked as if they wanted to beat this guy into powder. Her Majesty is about to disappear from this world. What can you do by coaxing her? It's just a sentence. Will you die? Or will you lose something? Do you have to be so hypocritical? Little bastard, little bastard. Anyway, no matter what you say, it's impossible. We don't need you to take responsibility. Are you not even willing to say a sentence?" Chuyang suddenly smiled and said, "Her Majesty is a beauty that can topple nations. She's devastatingly beautiful and gentle. I also like her very much." The Elven Empress' eyes lit up. Full of hope, she asked, "Then if there's a next life, how about I marry you?" This woman didn't even try to hide her feelings for him. She was so pure yet so eager. Chuyang nodded gently and said with a smile, "Okay." The Elven Empress suddenly smiled. Her eyes were full of tears. Looking at Chuyang reluctantly, she said, "I know you're coaxing me, but I'm still very happy. I love you, Chuyang. Do you know, when you didn't know my name, you once said, 'You'll dance with me, Cheong Shao, and I'll conquer the world with you.' I believe that at that time, you didn't know that Cheong Shao was my name." Chapter 2644. At this moment the Elven Empress' tone was actually a little mischievous. And, you dance with me Xiao and I'll accompany you to conquer the world. That's also my lifelong wish. Although it didn't really come true, there was still a man who said this, and that man is the man I love. Chu Yang's heart shook. He recalled that he had said these words to his brothers more than once in the past. However, she had never thought that this sentence would be such a beautiful dream for a woman. This was almost every woman's dream. You dance with me Xiao. I'll accompany you to conquer the world. This was also a kind of inseparability, and it was a true inseparability at the peak. Then the Elven Empress' body swayed slowly. She said, I'm going to disappear. You have the Elven Emperor seal with you. From now on you're the Elven Empress of the Elven race. Chuyang, my husband, Grandpa Arrow God. I'm sorry, goodbye, my wish has come true, I'm very satisfied. The Elven Empress figure gradually became illusory and dispersed like smoke, but her eyes were fixed on Chu Yang's face. They were dreamy and full of affection. I want to kiss you. She suddenly tried her best to float closer to Chu Yang, wanting to kiss him. Chu Yang didn't dodge. Any extra movement at this moment was equivalent to blaspheming the Elven Empress' true feelings. Chu Yang couldn't dodge and he couldn't bear to. However, the last bit of movement was all in vain. Her red lips, which had already dispersed into smoke, had completely dispersed the moment they touched Chu Yang's face. In the end, Chu Yang didn't feel this kiss. The Elven Empress Wu Qiongxiao didn't complete this kiss after all. And it dissipated, it seemed. All that was left was a sigh. This Elven Empress, who had been pure and flawless all her life, wanted to kiss the face of the man she loved at the last moment of her life. Such a small wish. She didn't even manage to do it. The Elven Empress completely dissipated, and the 5 elven gods burst into tears, especially the Arrow God, who was even more devastated. At this moment Chu Yang's heart was also a little sour. He didn't love the Elven Empress, but he pitied her a little. He couldn't let her pass away without regrets. To Chu Yang this was also a pity. Following the disappearance of the Elven Empress, the radiance emitted from the bodies of Mo Qingwu and the other 3 also gradually disappeared into their bodies. The 4 women gathered around Chu Yang. Even Zi Xiecheng, who was the most powerful, was no exception at this moment. After witnessing the passing of this peerless beauty and hearing her inner voice, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. It made the 4 women feel that in this world, there was nothing more important than having their loved ones by their side. There was also, at this moment, the way the 5 elven gods looked at the 4 of them truly frightened them. Their gazes were fanatical and sorrowful. Even though the 4 women were all experts. But under such a peculiar gaze she felt uncomfortable all over. She felt the safest by Chu Yang's side. As the person they loved and also the person who loved them, if they didn't use such a safe haven now, when would they? Chu Yang smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, just now, you did the right thing. Mo Qingwu and the other 3 said in unison. Then they looked at each other embarrassedly. Then Tai Budian said on behalf, she's really too pitiful. I can't help but feel pity for her. So cute and beautiful. Such a gentle beauty, yet she has to be alone for the rest of her life, waiting for the rest of her life. After hearing about her experience, our hearts also ached. She only has this one wish in her life. If you still can't fulfill it, that's too cruel. Chu Yang sighed. At this moment, how could he not have such thoughts in his heart? Otherwise, he wouldn't have stood still and let the Elven Empress do whatever she wanted. Yes, this Elven Empress Wu Qiongxiao was really too pitiful. Chu Yang couldn't even understand why the heavens would choose to torture such a peerless beauty. The only wish in her life, which could be said to be an extremely humble wish, was still not fulfilled even when she died and her will dissipated. How cruel the heavens were. A pure and clean life. This was truly the path of purity and purity in this life. Chu Yang and the others sighed in their hearts. The 5 elven gods walked toward them and looked at Chu Yang. Everyone's eyes and expressions were full of endless support and fanaticism. That was a feeling that went deep into their bones. Then the 5 of them knelt down and said in unison, Greetings, Your Majesty. Chu Yang was shocked when he heard that. Chu Yang didn't have time to think and hurriedly dodged. Since when did I become the Elven Empress? What's with this? I'm a purebred human, okay? I was already very depressed when I was slandered as a mixed breed. Now it's even worse. I'm a complete mutant now. Do you think I don't know that the Elven Empress must be a purebred elf? How can you tell that I'm a purebred elf? This is too ridiculous. Seeing the confusion on his face, the god of archery explained with a smile, Your Majesty, you have the Elven Emperor seal, the highest imperial seal of the elven race. Since the Elven Emperor seal has recognized you as its master, then you are our Elven Empress. He looked at the stunned and helpless Chu Yang with a doting look on his face. It was a kind of fondness that he couldn't get enough of. He said, "Also, you are someone personally recognized by Her Majesty, and you are our Empress husband. Then if you are not the Elven Empress, who else is?" His words were so shocking that Chu Yang was completely dizzy. This works too. What's this? How did I become the Elven Empress husband? Could he be any more ridiculous? Could he be any more ridiculous? Your Excellency, God of Archery, let's be frank. Everyone knows that what happened just now was just a temporary expedient. Chu Yang's mouth was dry. Senior God of Archery, what you said is too much. This is not something that can be joked about. It's too childish. Childish? We don't have the slightest intention of joking with you. How can such an important decision be childish? The God of Archery said seriously. Chu Yang, you have only been in the imperial court for a short period of time. This is indeed a tradition of the elven race, and it has been so since ancient times. Shui Leihan added, the situation now is as such. You can't reject it. The Elven Emperor's seal is with you, so you are the successor Elven Empress. It is your responsibility to lead the elven race. With Chu Yang's intelligence, he could naturally tell that there was too obvious a hint in Shui Leihan's words. The elven race was a rather huge force. They were about to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. That was a great help. However, no matter how great the help was, Chu Yang was still unwilling to be this so-called Elven Empress. If the key lies in the inheritance of the Elven Emperor's seal, Chu Yang pondered and said, why don't you find another elf with excellent aptitude? I will try to find a way to transfer the Elven Emperor's seal back to the elf you have chosen, and let everything return to the right track. What do you think? Chu Yang's sudden words almost caused the God of Archery and the Demon Empress Shui Leihan to break down. Try to transfer it. What do you think the Elven Emperor's seal is? You mustn't. The God of Archery jumped up. The Elven Emperor's seal is definitely not allowed to be transferred. Once the owner of the Emperor's seal gives up on it, the Emperor's seal will dissipate immediately. Unless what? Chu Yang asked. As long as there was the word, unless, it meant that there was hope. Chu Yang really didn't want to be that Elven Empress. Unless, the owner of the Elven Emperor's seal dies or disappears. Only then will the Elven Emperor's seal dissipate. But it will definitely not be transferred to someone else. The God of Archery was almost crying. This was the Elven Empress, the Empress of a race. With the strength of the Elven race, they could almost be above the heavens and the earth. How could there be someone so unwilling? Could it be that the world has really changed? Could it be that the Elven race is doomed? Chu Yang was stunned. It couldn't be transferred? Unless it died? Even if it died, it would only dissipate? For a moment, Chu Yang was really at a loss. He murmured, but I am so busy every day. Where do I have the time to be your Elven Empress? Is there really no other way? Chu Yang was very depressed. The 5 elven gods were also elders who had lived for countless years. Even if they weren't the smartest people, they were still very wise. They immediately understood Chu Yang's concerns and couldn't help but laugh. If you become the Elven Empress, you won't need to stay in the elven race. You don't have to stay in the elven territory for a long time. You can still do whatever you want. We won't interfere with your freedom. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. I see. As long as you don't disturb my normal life, there is room for discussion. The 5 elven gods laughed dryly. What kind of person is this? Is it so unfair for you to be our Elven Empress? The God of Strength, who had the most straightforward personality, rubbed his hands and said hesitantly, I heard that your Majesty has the spring of life? But how much exactly do you have? Do you have any leftovers? Hearing this, Chu Yang's expression also became strange. A surplus? Could it be that the elven race in the heavenly imperial court also doesn't have the spring of life? The 5 elven gods had awkward looks on their faces. After a while, the archer god laughed bitterly and said, Your Majesty, yes, our clan's spring of life has been treasuring and carefully protecting it all these years. However, without the support of the Elven Emperor's seal, our clan's spring of life has been decreasing year by year. It can be said that our situation has been deteriorating over the years. Now we're almost at the bottom, the 5 elven gods sighed at the same time. It's precisely because of such a problem with the spring of life that the elven race walked out of the elven forest and prepared to join the heavenly devil battlefield. Anyway, without the spring of life, the elven race is destined to gradually decline and wither. Why don't we take this opportunity to fight the heavenly devil battlefield to the death? At least we can die with more vigor. Chapter 2646. But I didn't expect that there would be a glimmer of hope this time. First, Her Majesty returned, and now, His Majesty ascended the throne, and the Fairy Emperor's seal gathered once again. The Strength God said with some relief, "It seems that the fairy race is magnanimous this time. Good people have good karma." Chuyang rolled his eyes and looked at the Strength God. He thought, "You guys have always been hiding in the mountains and forests. This time you came out because you had no other choice. How dare you say that you are magnanimous? Sigh, as the Fairy Emperor, even I can't bear to listen to this. Spring of life, I do have some." Chuyang calculated in his heart. He definitely had a lot of spring of life on hand. But there was no such thing as too much. Who knew how much the fairy race needed and how much he would have to give? 30%, 50%, 70%, or all of it? These were all unknown. But in the end, Chuyang still decided that it would be worth it even if he had to give up all of the spring of life to save the elf race and to provide such a powerful assistance in the battle against the extraterrestrial demons. Moreover, he was the Fairy Emperor. He couldn't just stand in the toilet and not do anything. On the side, Mo Tianji frowned slightly. He wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't. "I believe that my spring of life can solve the fairy race's urgent needs," Chuyang said lightly. "Since I am the Fairy Emperor, I naturally have to do something for the fairy race. Leave the fairy race's lack of spring of life to me." When Chuyang said this, the 5 fairy gods were overjoyed. They knew that Chuyang, the Fairy Emperor, was suddenly forced to do something beyond his ability. It was too sudden, and it was impossible for someone who wasn't in fairy to suddenly become the Fairy Emperor to hold all the real power. Chuyang really acted like a tyrant now. The 5 fairy gods might not listen to him ordering them to do this and that, and the fairy race might even riot. Even if they tried their best, it would be like they were obeying on the surface but opposing on the inside. The current situation was, the Fairy Emperor's seal had coincidentally landed on Chuyang, which was equivalent to binding Chuyang. Since Chuyang was willing to contribute to the spring of life, even if the fairy race's declining situation couldn't be completely resolved, there was at least room for improvement. It could be said to be a pretty good result. On this basis, the fairy race would do something for Chuyang. So, it was only natural for them to accept Chuyang's orders. But Minister Chu obviously hadn't finished speaking. The 5 elven gods immediately understood. He knew that the real show was about to begin. The elf emperor that he had just acknowledged was going to negotiate with them. However, everyone was already mentally prepared and did not feel that it was sudden. "Your Majesty, please speak," the 5 said in unison. "I also don't have any conditions, just one." Chuyang said seriously, "The experts of the elf clan must accompany me to exterminate the extraterrestrial demons. The expert I'm talking about. It means that the elves must send out all their elites and must not be negligent." Previously, Chuyang had also thought that the elves had come out in large numbers to fight against the extraterrestrial demons because there was no hope left. But if he gave them hope, would they shrink back? However, this concern only flashed through his mind. With the pride of the elves, such a thing would happen. It was absolutely impossible. Just this. The 5 elven gods were a little surprised by Chuyang's condition. "This is enough." Chuyang nodded seriously. "That's easy. Can this still be used as a condition?" The 5 elven gods heaved a sigh of relief and smiled with relief. The elves came out this time to kill the extraterrestrial demons. "Even if your Majesty didn't mention it, we would still have to fight. We can't pull out the bridge after crossing the river." At the side, Mo Tianji relaxed his brows and heaved a sigh of relief. This was also what he was worried about just now. It was not that he was trying to be petty, but this battle was really too crucial. A huge force like the elf clan was also very important. They could not afford any mishaps. Therefore, Mo Tianji was also worried about personal gains and losses. "Yes, so I didn't negotiate with you at all." Chuyang narrowed his eyes and smiled. Hearing that this was not a condition, with Minister Chu's shrewdness, he naturally changed the topic immediately. The shamelessness of a certain king of hell. Everyone was already used to this. It was just that the 5 elven gods had never dealt with someone before, so naturally they were at a disadvantage. Therefore, the 5 elven gods were depressed again. "We were just saying it to express our clan's sense of right and wrong. You really went along with it." The saint had been defeated, and the situation was set. Everyone knew that from now on, the imperial court was bound to usher in unprecedented chaos. The Saint Emperor Palace's strength, which belonged to the saint, would definitely bring about huge losses to the imperial court. However, after this wave of chaos, great chaos would inevitably be followed by great governance. It could be expected that there would truly be long-term peace and stability. Of course, this was on the premise that the extraterrestrial demons were completely eliminated. "How's the latest news?" Shui Leihan asked when he heard the jingling sounds on Mo Tianji's body. Ever since he revealed his identity as the head of the Heavenly Secrets Intelligence Department, Mo Tianji couldn't wait to fully release this sound. This was because with the Heavenly Secrets hands on him, there would be news coming every time. Every piece of news couldn't be heard by others, but all the vibrations had to be borne by him alone. It wasn't that big of a commotion, but if it was too frequent, it could really annoy him to death. Even though it wasn't a big commotion, he could feel his heart being shaken to the point of being unwell at all times. Once he let it go, he naturally felt a lot better. It was just that during the time when Yang was talking to the 5 elven gods, the jingling sounds had rung no less than hundreds of times. These hundreds of times meant that there were hundreds of the latest news coming from all over the world. Shui Leihan had always been very surprised by this. How could this thing be carried around to receive news? Because he, the Demon Empress, and even the Saint didn't have such a thing. The latest news? Mo Tianji read as he spoke. Unexpectedly, he himself couldn't help but chuckle first. The world is really in chaos. Mo Tianji smiled and said, "The first thing is that after the great emperor of the extreme heaven Wuxia received the news we released, he immediately announced to the world that Yang is the minister of the Jade Heavens, a position above the heavenly emperor. Anyone in the extreme heaven who disagrees will be killed without mercy." This is a beautiful move, awesome. Shui Leihan and the Demon Empress clapped and praised at the same time. As the spiritual pillar of the imperial court for a long time, the Saint Emperor had suddenly fallen. Then there would definitely be turbulence in the imperial court. Many people who were used to heroes would find it hard to accept at the moment. And at this time, a new spiritual leader had to be pushed out immediately and cleanly to be the new spiritual pillar of the imperial court. And Yang was the best candidate to replace the Saint Emperor now. Although Dong Wuxiang was used to being magnanimous, this move was exceptionally well done. It was very timely and could be said to be extremely beautiful. Mo Tianji smiled bitterly in his heart. When Shui Leihan and Yao Xener said that it was beautiful, he knew what they were thinking. They would definitely think that Dong Wuxiang was far-sighted and prepared for a rainy day. But with Mo Tianji's understanding of Dong Wuxiang, this guy definitely wouldn't think so far ahead. Most likely this fellow was doing this purely to push his boss up to the top. As for the far-reaching impact and profound meaning, Dong Wuxiang probably didn't have any of that in his mind. Shui Leihan and Yao Xen really praised the wrong person for praising Dong Wuxiang. Beautiful. The 5 elven gods only noticed the name, Qiong Shao Minister, and couldn't help but applaud and praise. It is indeed beautiful. Her Majesty's name is also in it. It is indeed a match made in heaven, a perfect match. Mo Tianji, Shui Leihan and the others all looked at the 5 elven gods speechlessly. This Qiong Shao was not the same Qiong Shao. Although the names were exactly the same, the meaning was completely different. You elves really know how to flatter yourselves. But if they really wanted to interpret it this way, there was really no way. Actually, the real problem was, Dong Wuxiang was now in the extreme heavens. How would he know who Wu Qiong Shao was? Xia Dan Qiong coughed and said, "In fact, the name Minister Qiong Shao was given to Big Brother by the few of us at that time, because Big Brother used to be a minister in the lower 3 heavens. And his reputation as a minister shook the world." Cough cough. At this point he looked at Tai Budian a little awkwardly. Tai Budian smiled and said, "Yes, at that time he was my minister." At the mention of "he was my minister," Tai Buqian's eyes lit up and a sense of happiness rose in her. Recalling the bits and pieces back then, Tai Budian suddenly felt that she had nothing more to ask for in this life. Back then, Chu Yang entered Iron Cloud alone with one sword and supported her side by side. Through all kinds of despair and dangers, they fought step by step. In the past, Bu Tiantai and Minister Chu were at the end of the road. They fought hard to rule over the world and rule over the world. Every time Tai Budian thought of this experience, she would feel that her happiness was already incomparable. Mo Qingwu, Zi Sheqing and the others looked at Tai Budian with some envy, unconcealable envy. Because during that period of time, other than Wu Qianqian, the two of them couldn't compare at all. Mo Qingwu was a little better. She had at least interacted with Chu Yang before. Unfortunately, she was still a little girl at that time. She only acted cute and coquettish for a few days before returning for 3 days. As for Big Sister Z, it seemed that she only got to know a certain someone after a long time. That period of time belonged to Chu Yang and Tai Budian. At that time, everyone was still in their insignificant period. We once joked that if I became the Heavenly Emperor in the future, I would definitely respect the old minister. The joke that day was still vivid in my mind and still ringing in my ears. I didn't expect Dong Wuxiang to do it before everyone else. Xia Danxiong smiled and said, "The majesty of the heavens and the aura of Qiong Shao is Minister Qiong Shao." Chapter 2647. GMO Luo Kudi and Mo Tianji smiled at the same time. How could they forget the past when they were brothers? That was a little secret that all the brothers kept from their boss. It was also the only thing that they kept from their boss in their lives, a common little secret between the brothers. At that time, everyone rushed up to the Heavenly Imperial Court and gathered at Mo Yun Sky and Xia Danqiong's place for the first time to deal with Yuan Tianji. Xia Danqiong's Heavenly Emperor position was already in its embryonic form. It was also that time that everyone really had ambition and confidence. They made such a promise to each other. "If I become the Heavenly Emperor, you will be the minister. The Heavenly Imperial Court will be the emperor. No one dares to disobey his orders. No one can compete with him in the firmament. The brothers are of one heart and the world shares the same name." This was the promise of all the brothers. It was also the greatest respect and gratitude that they had for Chu Yang from the depths of their hearts. But now Dong Wuxiang was the first to reveal it. Xia Danqiong snorted in his heart. "I'll definitely settle the score with Dong Wuxiang when I see him. This guy actually didn't negotiate with me and just arbitrarily took the lead. Is he deliberately making things difficult for me?" Back then Xia Danqiong was the first to ascend to the Heavenly Emperor position. No, definitely not. I must settle the score. Mo Tianji was still full of joy and continued to announce the second piece of news. Heavenly Emperor Wu Shang announced that he will attack the 10,000 saints true spirits in the entire extreme heaven. In the territory of the extreme heaven, everyone must take the responsibility of destroying the 10,000 saints true spirits. The original forces of the Holy Emperor Palace will all be destroyed. Not a single one will be spared. The extreme heaven will take the lead in resisting Sage Monarch Master Yun. Furthermore, the Heavenly Emperor and Heavenly Empress will personally destroy the forces of the Holy Emperor Palace in the extreme heaven. The specific situation has not been reported yet, but there will be more detailed information soon. Mo Tianji said, however, Heavenly Emperor Wu Shang said that anyone who comes with the heads of the Holy Emperor Palace's experts will be rewarded with an official position as long as their identity is verified. They will be given special honors. Oh! Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Then they sucked in a breath again. Dong Wuxiang's move was really ruthless. The Holy Emperor Palace's elites were all wiped out. Right now, only a few halls still existed in the various realms. Although they were scattered all over the place and there were many of them. However, there were almost no true peak experts left. Even if there were one or two of them, they would definitely not be a match for the Heavenly Emperor and Heavenly Empress. Furthermore, there was also a bounty for heads. To ordinary Tianke experts, they only needed to kill one person. Then, she would have a bright future. This would make most of the people in the extreme Celestial Empire go crazy. Dong Wuxiang's order was tantamount to completely wiping out the existence of Holy Emperor Palace in the Empyrean Terminus. Mo Qinji and Chu Yang exchanged a look. This final bounty order was definitely not something that a blockhead like Dong Wuxiang could come up with. If it wasn't Mo Layer's handiwork, then it must have been the handiwork of the military officials. Then it was the green sky heavens. The evil cloud Great Emperor Ao Shiyun also announced that Chu Yang would be the minister of Jade Clouds. At the same time, they began to slaughter the 10,000 saints true spirits, destroy all the forces of the Holy Emperor Palace, and hunt down the original members of the Holy Emperor Palace. Furthermore, he's offering a bounty for the head of a noble. This was the second piece of news. Ao Shiyun's side had also started to take action. This guy was even more ruthless. In order to wipe out Holy Emperor Palace, he might even offer a noble title. There was also the Ink Sky Heavens. The Jasper Flower Great Emperor Xia Danqiong also announced the same news. Chu Yang will be the minister of Jade Clouds, and he will attack Master Yun in all aspects and wipe out Holy Emperor Palace's forces. There was also an order targeting the 10,000 saints true spirit. It's also a bounty for heads. Now the Ink Sky Heavens is already in chaos. Everyone is fighting to be the first. However, once this information was out, Everyone looked at the jasper flower great Emperor Xie Danxiong, who was still here, in astonishment. Could it be that Xie Danxiong got retribution for impersonating someone and was impersonated by someone else? Xie Danxiong didn't mind everyone's astonished gazes at all. Instead, he said rather complacently, "Naturally, someone will do these things. Should be my wife. It's very normal for her to issue orders in my name. It's good to have a good wife. This kind of thing is something that some bachelors can't even be envious of." Everyone laughed. Rui Badong rubbed his fists and his hatred skyrocketed. Among the brothers, it seemed that only Rui Badong didn't do anything. This provocation and hatred, it was very strong. "Just you wait." Rui Badong threatened fiercely. The Eastern Emperor, Demon Empress, and the 5 elven gods were indescribably shocked at this moment. They all realized one thing. Chu Yang's brothers who weren't here actually didn't value the position of Celestial Emperor that they had obtained through hard work. It wasn't just these few people. These people in front of them also had their own considerable forces, but when had they ever valued them? Since ancient times, whether it was the Celestial Palace or the human world's emperors, there was a saying that women can't interfere in politics. However, this Jasper Flower Great Emperor, as a Celestial Emperor, actually casually handed the Celestial Emperor's Jade Seal, which represented supreme power, to his wife to play with. Moreover, she could issue any orders in his place. This was simply an inconceivable thing. Then the other little ones actually didn't feel the slightest bit surprised. Instead, they all had an expression as if it was a matter of course. They knew that this group of people were all the same. Even supreme power wasn't as important as brotherly love. Husband and wife love. This was their heart, their persistence. Such persistence gave the Eastern Emperor Demon Empress a great shock. The two looked at each other and saw the envy and approval in each other's eyes. They were the ones who had the most flavor in their lives, and also the ones who had the most ambition. The big western sky sighed. Mo Tianji continued to read. Gu Duxing led the reassembled Heavenly Armament Pavilion's military forces and launched a new round of fierce fighting with Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor. Gu Duxing himself was admittedly invincible, but due to the great disparity in military strength between the two sides, the battle situation fell into a deadlock. However, after the news that Master Cloud was the master of myriad holy true spirits spread out, the army of the big western skies Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor's side collapsed in an extremely short time. The army was defeated like a landslide. Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor himself was disheartened. He sealed his sword and retired, announcing his withdrawal from the struggle for hegemony over the world. Everyone was shocked. But thinking about it, this was actually to be expected. The sage was myriad holy true devil, and also fully supported Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor. Now, Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yequang was like yellow mud that had fallen into his pants. Even if it wasn't shit, it was shit. Apart from quietly withdrawing, there was no other way. If he still stubbornly resisted, he was afraid that he would attract the joint encirclement of the various great heavenly emperors, turning into scattered ashes. Extermination was right before his eyes. Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yequang admitted defeat on the spot. He honored Gu Duxing as the solitary Heavenly Emperor and handed over all his authority. Then he led a team of trusted experts and rushed to Purple Cloud Heavens to fight the Heavenly Demon, Sai. Shui Leihan and the Demon Empress sighed at the same time. The big western skies Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yequang had never been considered outstanding among the Heavenly Emperors. Moreover, he had a reckless personality and was easily impulsive. He had always been neutral in establishing his faction, but this time, he had been firmly conned by the sage. Now that things had come to this, he naturally didn't have any face to occupy the position of Heavenly Emperor. But, for Wu Yequang to be able to make this kind of choice at the last moment, he can still be considered a man. Everyone sighed silently. Mo Tianji smiled coldly. He was conned so miserably by the sage. Even if he went to fight the Heavenly Demon, others may not really believe him. Moreover, this is the only way he can barely express his true intentions. This has nothing to do with whether he is a man or not. Perhaps he really is a hot-blooded man, but right now no one will pay attention to this. Everyone thought about it and couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Just as Mo Tianji said, Wu Yequang's current position was really awkward to the extreme. No matter what he did, suspicion hung on his buttocks. The sage's conning directly made this generation's Heavenly Emperor, aside from the Purple Cloud Heavens battlefield, have no place to stay. The solitary Heavenly Emperor Gu Duxing, after the war ended, immediately released the news. He honored Chu Yang as the minister of Jade Cloud. The entire big western sky, encircle and annihilate the 10,000 saints' true spirit. Encircle and annihilate the forces of the Holy Emperor Palace. At the same time, several heavenly emperors issued orders at the same time. The whole world is preparing for war. All armies are to assemble and train. All departments are to be fully prepared. At any time, the army is to head north and exterminate the heavenly demon. This is the demon slaughtering order. When Mo Tianji read this, everyone's blood was already boiling. It was hard to restrain themselves. The demon slaughtering order had finally blossomed in the heavenly imperial court. Exterminating the heavenly demon, that was the common wish of many generations in the heavenly imperial court. How many people had been looking forward to this day for many years? The hot blood in their hearts had never been extinguished. Now, had it finally reached the present stage? However, after Mo Tianji received another piece of new information, he seemed to be somewhat hesitant. He wanted to say something but stopped. What else is there? Is it bad news? The demon empress asked. The sage had suffered a great defeat this time. Naturally, he would not make a move to counterattack. He had always operated in the heavenly imperial court for more than 1,000,000 years. The forces under his command were certainly not few. Making a counterattack at the first opportunity was also reasonable. Cough cough. I really don't know if this is good news or bad news, haha. Mo Tianji coughed twice. He smiled bitterly and continued to read. The Demon Emperor's Sky Demon Imperial Palace officially announced that they honored Chu Yang as the Minister of Jade Cloud. Furthermore, the entire Demon Emperor's heaven will encircle and annihilate the 10,000 saints' true spirit and annihilate the remnants of the Saint Emperor's palace. The Demon Empress was stunned for a moment. Then she came to a realization and said angrily, "This little bastard. He honored Chu Yang as the Minister of Jade Cloud, but where did he put his mother? I haven't even returned and he's already planning to usurp the throne and change the dynasty? What the hell is he doing?" Everyone tried hard to hold back their laughter. They coughed repeatedly. They were laughing so hard that their stomachs hurt. They all thought that it was no wonder Mo Tianji's behavior was so melodramatic. They didn't know how to explain this news. It was hard to say. Why did Yao Ningning join in the fun? They were just waiting for the Demon Empress to return. It would only take a moment. This guy couldn't even wait for this moment and joined in the fun. Chapter 2649. Shui Leihan said with a smile, "That's not a problem. On the contrary, I think this is a good decision. Anyway, your position will be given to him sooner or later. Since he has made such a decision, other than taking into account his brotherhood, it also means that he is willing to shoulder this burden. You should really feel happy about it. This is really not something to be embarrassed about. Not only your Demon Emperor Heaven, but even my Eastern Royal Heaven will also announce that we will honor Chu Yang as the Minister of Fine Clouds. We will also begin to annihilate the forces of the Holy Emperor Palace and the 10,000 Saints' Holy Spirits. Anyway, I just don't feel good. When I go back this time, I'll beat that little bastard until he cries for his parents." The Demon Empress said hatefully. Shui Leihan laughed out loud. Then he sighed emotionally. Looking at Chu Yang and the rest, he sighed. Originally, he thought that if Chu Yang and the rest could catch up to him in 10,000 years, it would already be very good and commendable. As for catching up to him in a few thousand years or a few hundred years, although that was an extravagant hope, it was not absolutely impossible. But now, not 10,000 years, 1,000 years, 100 years, but a few years. Shui Leihan suddenly felt that he was really a little old. The new generation surpasses the old. Shui Leihan sighed and looked at the Demon Empress. The Demon Empress said angrily, "Why are you looking at me? Are you mocking me for being old?" Suddenly she thought of something and her face turned red. Shui Leihan was obviously sighing and self-deprecating. There was also the meaning of, "I'm about to be replaced and want to live in seclusion." As for looking at her, it was probably because he wanted her and him too. Humph. The Demon Empress snorted with a red face. She turned her head away. Mo Tianji exclaimed in surprise. During this period, Mo Tianji had been receiving information. A large amount of information came in one after another. Now that he suddenly spoke and his tone was full of questions, everyone couldn't help but be curious. "What happened? Hurry up and tell us, don't beat around the bush," everyone asked. Cloud Master's son Yun Tian was ambushed near the extreme heaven together with a group of guards. They died at the same time. The attacker was the son of the heavenly emperor of the Green Cloud Heaven, Stranger. Everyone was taken aback when they heard this. This news was extremely unexpected. Chu Yang recalled the time when he had just arrived in the eastern royal heavens. This was the first time he saw Yin Tian and he was in high spirits. He could not help but sigh. That. He was definitely a talent. But before he could do anything he was killed just like that. Xue Leihan's expression was exceptionally complicated. Since this Yun Tian was able to survive until now, he was most likely Xue Xian'er's son. In other words, he was his nephew. He died just like that? He sighed softly. For a moment he didn't know what he was feeling. The everlasting celestial emperor of the grand overarching heaven Zi Wuji has issued an order to hunt down the remnants of the Holy Emperor Palace and kill the myriad Holy True Spirit. This order of his was unanimously criticized by many heavenly emperors. Amo Tianji seemed to have received the latest news. Reading it he could not help but laugh. What? Blame? What? Everyone was puzzled. Yes, it's really an accusation. Amo Tianji said, Amo Yun Tian. The big western sky, extreme heaven, clear firmament heaven, and demon emperor heaven, jointly questioned the everlasting celestial emperor. Why didn't you honor Chu Yang as the jade firmament throne? Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed out loud. This kind of accusation was really rude and unreasonable to the extreme. Chu Yang was your boss, not someone else's boss. Why did you honor him as the jade firmament throne, and why should others honor him as the jade firmament throne? There was probably no one who could be more unreasonable than him. Cough cough. Amo Tianji seemed to be a little embarrassed by his brother's rudeness. He said, the heavenly emperors made a statement. If there is a day when you don't honor Chu Yang as the jade firmament throne, there will be, so and so. Currently the Daluo heaven is holding an emergency meeting, discussing something, cough cough cough. Holding an emergency meeting? It could be seen how far they had forced the other party. The Eastern Royal Sky released the news, to hunt down the remnants of the Holy Emperor Palace and the 10,000 Saints' True Spirit. However, they did not announce the news of the Jade Firmament Throne. Thus, they were similarly criticized, questioned. Amo Tianji looked at Xue Leihan from the corner of his eyes. Xue Leihan, who was laughing out loud and gloating over the everlasting celestial emperor's misfortune, was stunned. Then he flew into a rage. I say, isn't this too unreasonable? Don't you have any sense of justice? He was still gloating just now, and in the blink of an eye, it was his turn. Amo Tianji and Xie Danxiong smiled calmly. Your Majesty, we just feel that it's best to unify the steps for this kind of thing. Didn't you also praise this matter just now? Why are you saying this now? Xue Leihan was speechless. He roared, justice is in the hearts of the people. You are threatening, coercing, oppressing. This is simply unreasonable. Unreasonable to the extreme. Xie Danxiong laughed and said, is utility really in the hearts of the people? I think it's more about power. Actually, isn't all of this created by you? You already have such great achievements, why are you still angry? Isn't this too fake? Look at your mouth, it's all the way to the back of your ears and you're still pretending to object. Xue Leihan was stunned. He almost turned his anger into laughter. He coughed forcefully and held it in. Just as Xie Danxiong said, Donghuang Xue Leihan was the real instigator of everything that happened today. Xue Leihan coughed a few times before he put on an unwilling expression and said, I'm not angry. I also feel that it's best to unify the steps. But before I go back, you guys have already started to bully people. Especially you, Xie Danxiong, you're the most unscrupulous. I was wrong about you. Pretty boy, you really don't have good intentions. Otherwise they would all call you Xie Rabbit. I was still wondering why it was such a name. Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. Xie Danxiong was innocently implicated. His face was full of black lines. What does this have to do with my nickname? That's too unreasonable, isn't it? The situation had already developed to the current stage. Everyone on this side also started to take action on this side. They didn't need to discuss anything at all. They immediately went their separate ways. The Demon Empress had to return to the Demon Palace immediately to preside over the situation and stabilize the hearts of the demons. With Yao Ningning's current aura, she might not be able to control the situation. Therefore, the Demon Empress still needed to appear personally. Dong Huang also had to return to the Eastern Royal Heavens immediately to make arrangements. Most importantly, he also had to officially release a supplementary statement of honoring Chu Yang as the Minister of Jade Clouds, to set an example for the others after DE. And the reason had to be sufficient, reasonable, and not appear to be forced. Otherwise, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion would have the final say in the Imperial Court. Shui Leihan himself was rather dissatisfied with this arrangement. The first reason was that he was actually used by himself. Although he was willing, he still felt a little uncomfortable. His feelings were really complicated. The second reason was also very intolerable. He had just established a relationship with Xen and was looking forward to a deeper level of communication. Moreover, the chances were very high. But, at such a good time, you want me to return to the Eastern Royal Heavens and separate us lovers? Don't you have any sense of justice? This was really intolerable. Even if the uncle could tolerate it, the aunt couldn't. No, the uncle couldn't tolerate it. His Majesty Dong Huang let out a long sigh. He felt that the separation of life was impermanent and unpredictable. He was filled with the sorrow of separation. The most difficult thing in the world is lovesickness. Separation makes lovesickness worse. Lovesickness is the bitterness of lovesickness. His Majesty Dong Huang wanted to write a poem, but after racking his brains he could only recite a few sentences. Because his buttocks had already been ruthlessly kicked by the blushing Demon Empress. Then the Demon Empress also swayed away, leaving behind a vicious sentence. Disrespectful. I made you lovesickness. Everyone looked at His Majesty Dong Huang, who was kicked flat on the ground. They wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. Yes, you made me lovesickness. Dong Huang patted his buttocks and sat up. He didn't seem to mind at all and looked thoughtful. Everyone finally burst out laughing. However, Dong Huang Heaven still had to return to the Eastern Royal Heaven. Now, the matter of honoring Chu Yang as the Minister of Jade Clouds was very important. Those intimate moments in front of flowers and under the moonlight could wait until they had the time. Besides the Demon Empress Dong Huang, who rushed back to her own heaven and earth, Xia Danxiong also rushed back to Ink Cloud Heaven. GMO Luo Kedi and Rui Badong also set off at the same time to return to their own heaven and earth. They couldn't let Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang and the others enjoy the limelight. How could they miss out on such a good thing like honoring Chu Yang as the Minister of Jade Clouds? They only gathered for a short period of time before everyone scattered and went their separate ways. The whole world, including Qi Heaven, the South Pole Heaven and the Buddha Heaven, started to make similar announcements. Hunt down Master Yun, destroy the forces of the Saint Emperor Palace, encircle and annihilate the 10,000 saints' true spirits. At this point, the entire Heaven Imperial Court no longer had a place for the Saint Emperor Master Yun. And all of this completely erupted in an instant after the Great Battle. The power of the Tianji Intelligence Department established by Mo Tianji was uniform and terrifying. When Mo Tianji and Chu Le's other two lovers left together, Mo Tianji said, "This time, everyone is basically fighting for themselves. And everyone can't take care of each other. So, I've already spread the news." Chu Yang asked, "What news?" "The news is, everyone has to occupy a heaven and earth. If they succeed, it'll be considered a success and they'll have the basic foundation. And in the future battle of the Purple Cloud Heaven, it'll depend on whose contribution is greater." Mo Tianji smiled mysteriously. "This contribution isn't just for show. There are other rewards and punishments. But, Big Brother, you and I can be an exception. We won't participate in this competition." Chu Yang said in surprise, "Why can you be an exception?" Chapter 2650. Chu Yang was a little puzzled. He was pushed to the throne by his brothers. Of course he could be excluded. But why was Mo Tianji excluded? Wasn't he afraid of being attacked by everyone? Because I already have my own special force. It's the kind that will never weaken. Mo Tianji smiled faintly and was full of confidence. Intelligence Kingdom. In this realm, I will be invincible and unrivaled. So, I won't fight with everyone for that. Heavenly Emperor Tianji is already worthy of his name. Mo Tianji smiled and said, "Don't you think so, Big Brother?" Chu Yang heard this and laughed. His surprise disappeared. That was true. Mo Tianji's Intelligence Kingdom was already fully formed. He only needed a command to make the entire Heaven Imperial Court tremble. Indeed, he didn't need to occupy any specific territory. In addition, Mo Tianji's words also faintly revealed the direction that Chu Yang and the others had been working towards. We'll never stop at the Heaven Imperial Court. In the past it was the Heaven Imperial Court. In the future, it will be a wider and more limitless realm. We will definitely go to a wider space in the future. If we have a world, we will naturally have our own responsibilities and restraints. The others could leave at any time. Only Mo Tianji couldn't. Mo Tianji was the kind of person who would do his best when he did something. This was actually a kind of obsessive-compulsive disorder. In order to prevent his obsessive-compulsive disorder from acting up, Mo Tianji simply withdrew from this competition. It also prevented him from being unwilling to leave in the future. That awkward ending. The Tianji intelligence department that Mo Tianji had set up was actually an unusually large organization. In terms of influence, it was above any other force in Heaven Imperial Court. But this intelligence department had one advantage. That was, it could still operate without Mo Tianji. Mo Tianji was admittedly more efficient. But it wouldn't completely collapse without him. And Mo Tianji might have deliberately created such a situation. Because Mo Tianji had absolute confidence in himself, Chu Yang, and the brothers. His future and the brothers' future wouldn't stop at the Heaven Imperial Court. The next time we meet again, I'll tell you. It should be in purple cloud heavens in front of the heavenly demon array. Mo Tianji smiled and said. Chu Yang pondered and said, perhaps, we can meet again for the final battle with Saint Monarch. Mo Tianji shook his head. That's unlikely. Even if it was a reunion, they wouldn't have gathered so many people either. The current sage no longer has that kind of weight. It's not worth it for all of us to gather. The sentence was really arrogant to the extreme. The only Saint Monarch of his generation had actually lost the qualifications to be besieged by Mo Tianji. However, none of the people who heard it objected. Because that was the truth. Everyone was already at the peak of the world. Mo Tianji smiled and looked at Mo Qingwu. Little sister, big brother won't be by your side to take care of you. You must take care of yourself. Mo Qingwu nodded obediently. Chu Yang said impatiently, what are you talking about? I can take care of my own wife. You don't need to worry about her. Hurry up and get lost. What's the point of talking about all this nonsense? Hey, don't forget to take good care of my sister. If my sister suffers any grievances, I'll skin you alive. Mo Tianji laughed and held Chu Luer's hand. Then he left. Chu Luer's happy and satisfied voice could be heard from afar. Big brother, you don't have to worry about me. Take care of yourself. Chu Luer was extremely happy to be cared for by her big brother. Before she finished speaking, she had already disappeared. Chu Yang touched his nose and smiled bitterly in his heart. He thought to himself, sister, I'll definitely be worried about you. However, I'm really not worried about you. Not only do you have someone like Mo Tianji to take care of you, I also have the cultivation of a peak saint and unparalleled poison skills. If I continue to worry about you, I'll be too free. Instead of worrying about you, I'd rather worry about those pitiful people who are attracted by your beautiful face and want to kiss you. In the blink of an eye, all the brothers had left without a trace. Only Chu Yang, Zi Xiecheng, Mo Qingwu, Tai Budian, Wu Chanshan and their family of 5 were left. Yes, and the 5 elven gods. Looking at the hopeful eyes of the 5 elven gods, Chu Yang sighed and said, let's go to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion first and arrange things there. Then we'll go to the Elven Forest immediately to solve the problem of the Spring of Life. Hearing this, the Arrow God and the others were all excited. They were excited from the bottom of their hearts. Finally they relented. The elven race was saved. At this moment the Arrow God was extremely glad. The heavens were still looking out for the elven race. Luckily. Back then, the saint tried his best to instigate him to go to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion to assassinate Zi Xiecheng. Luckily he didn't have the heart to do it at the last moment. Otherwise, if his hand had trembled and that arrow had been shot. Thinking of this, the Arrow God broke out in cold sweat. At this moment, how could they still talk about the Elven Royal Seal and the Spring of Life? The entire elven race would probably have ceased to exist by now. That would be a joke to the point of being unbelievable. That arrow hadn't been shot was not only because the heavens were looking out for it, but also because the ancestors of the elven race were looking out for it. The group returned to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Chu Yang immediately started to assign tasks. Now, the most important thing was to train the soldiers. Also, help me pass on a message to the Tang clan's 3rd young master. Ask him to prepare all the provisions needed for this war. Whether it's food, drinks, clothes, weapons, herbs, etc., they must be fully prepared. There must be no mistakes. Chu Yang repeatedly instructed. Also, other than ensuring that every soldier participating in the war has a storage space ring, the camp must also have a certain amount of reserves in case of emergency. This has been in preparation for a long time. There will definitely be no problem. Zi Xiecheng interrupted. That's good. Chu Yang said, other than that, we still have to do our best to publicize and incite. Now, it was almost time for the bloody battle to begin. Even if they had to resort to underhanded means, they would have to use them. Everything was for the long-term peace and stability of the Heaven Imperial Court. At this time there's no need to worry about anything. Chu Yang's words were very vague, but Meng Wuya and the rest all understood. Those who achieved great things did not bother about trifles. In the face of righteousness, even if they had to use some unpresentable methods, they had no choice but to use them. Everything had to be done with the priority of restoring the purple cloud heavens and destroying the extraterrestrial demons. Your Majesty, the archer god said, do we need to coordinate the combat power of the elf race with that of the heavenly armament pavilion? For example, add a few more archers and some assassins of the night to coordinate with each troop? Even the eyes of Meng Wuya and the rest lit up when they heard this. The archer god's suggestion was not only feasible, it was simply too feasible. If they could increase their combat power out of thin air, it would be a great thing for everyone. The archery skills of the elf race had always been the best in the Heaven Imperial Court. The assassins of the night were also incomparable to ordinary assassins. If they could have such combat power to join them, the strength of their troop would definitely increase by several folds. However, after pondering for a long time, Xu Yang finally rejected it. There's no need. The elf race will follow the organization of the elf race and form their own army. As long as they are well prepared for battle, they can go to the battlefield at a single command. Everything else is not a big problem. Chapter 2651. Zi Shiqing was puzzled. She asked, why can't the two armies merge? If we work together, both sides will benefit. If we work together and complement each other's weaknesses, the strength of the battle team will definitely be boosted. Everyone has their own way of doing things, so there will be gaps. Take the elves as an example. Although every elf has considerable strength and is a natural archer, they are not good at close combat and group battles. Once they engage in close combat, the losses will definitely be great. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. How could I not know the principle of mutual benefits and complementing each other's shortcomings? But the elves are proud, conceited, clean and competitive. These are naturally their strengths. But on the battlefield, these have become their weaknesses. At least, it's very difficult for the elves to follow orders and prohibitions, and enforce the law with their words. They have never worked together before. If they rashly merge the two armies, there will definitely be friction. The merging of millions of troops will take at least half a year. Furthermore, we can't do anything in this half a year. We can't even guarantee that we won't be at loggerheads after half a year. If there's enough time, I'll naturally try to break in and increase the strength of the battle team. However, a battle team that has not worked together will instead be a loss in terms of battle power. Chu Yang said solemnly, the pride of the elves makes them even. An ordinary elf looks down on the peak experts of the human race, let alone the experts of the elves. No matter whether it is our human or elven warriors, they are all prepared to sacrifice their lives for the future of Tianquebec. But when the two come together, one side will definitely have to sacrifice themselves. Why should we let our soldiers suppress themselves before they get into a bloody battle? Sacrifice themselves? Let's just let everyone win on the battlefield based on the number of enemies they kill. Let's not do this kind of unnecessary work together, Chu Yang said solemnly. We really don't have much time left. If the soldiers survive, let them live with infinite glory. If any of them are unlucky, let them live with honor. If they die on the battlefield in the end, let them die with pride. Don't let them be suppressed again before they die. What you consider is battle power, but what I consider is the hearts of the people. Chu Yang said, ultimately what determines battle power is still the hearts of the people. Chu Yang's words. Meng Wuya, Li Guanyu and the rest were completely silent. Even the 5 elven gods fell silent after hearing this. Chu Yang's misgivings definitely existed, and no one could erase them. The 5 elven gods were all old people who had lived for a long time. So, how could they not understand this principle? If they were to pat their chests and guarantee that the elves would be able to do so, not to mention Chu Yang and the others, even they themselves wouldn't believe it. In fact, it wasn't just the 5 elven gods. They had to admit that. No one had expected it. What they had expected was only the powerful combat strength after the combination. They had not expected the situation at all. It was simply an illusion, unforgettable but unattainable. However, Chu Yang had already completely figured out the thoughts of these two people. Chu Yang's concerns. That was what was truly reasonable, far-sighted and far-sighted. After making sure that there were no oversights, Chu Yang made a special trip to the mountains near Luohua City and scattered the mist from the Spring of Life, to make up for Zi Sheqing's fire that sealed the mountains for 3,000 miles. They watched as Chu Yang waved his hand and sprinkled the water mist that was full of life energy. The barren mountains instantly regained their vitality and became lush and green. The eyes of the god of archery and the others almost popped out. They knew that Chu Yang had the spring of life, but they didn't expect him to have so much. And it was indeed the purest. And it vaguely surpassed. The god of archery couldn't wait and urged him, almost in tears. Chu Yang finally relented, together with Zi Sheqing and the rest. With Zi Sheqing and the others, they left the Demon Emperor's Heaven Weapon Pavilion and went to the Elven camp. When they arrived at the Elven camp, the 5 elven gods asked Chu Yang to show them the Elven Emperor's seal. Chu Yang was not stingy and showed them the Elven Emperor's seal. The moment the Elven Emperor's seal appeared, millions of elves knelt on the ground and paid their respects to the Elven Emperor, Lord Chu Yang. After that, the elven army immediately set off and returned to the elven forest. It was better to go back and settle the matter of the Spring of Life as soon as possible so that the elves could participate in the battle without any worries and prepare for the final battle. It was just that on the way the elven army's slogans made Chu Yang feel a little awkward. Because those slogans were too awkward. Guard the heavenly imperial court and kill the extraterrestrial demons. This is the sacred and inviolable responsibility and obligation of the elven race. How could Chu Yang not feel ashamed when he heard such slogans? Guard the entire human race, it is the glory of the elven race. Black lines appeared on Chu Yang's forehead. The god of archery also felt a little awkward about this. The elves had always considered themselves as the protectors of the human race and the saviors of the world. But now, the new elven emperor seemed to be very unhappy about this. It was no wonder. The elven emperor was a pure human being. It would be strange if he liked the elves' slogans that made them feel good about themselves. But Chu Yang wouldn't say anything. Before the great battle, this kind of feeling of self-esteem was better. The higher their combat power would be. Fortunately, Chu Yang didn't say anything. The 5 elven gods secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Let me ask, how many elves, with the combat power of heaven grade and above, can the elven race send? Chu Yang asked. Probably, no less than 8 million. The god of archery made a rough estimate and replied. The entire elven race only had 100 or 200 million people, but there were no less than 8 million people with the combat power of heaven grade and above. This ratio was quite shocking. The elven race's combat power is indeed worthy of its reputation. With the help of the elves, our chances of winning this battle have increased a lot. Chu Yang thought for a while and asked, are there specialized commanders? Yes. The god of archery said, our commanders may not necessarily have profound martial arts, but everyone is an expert in battle formations. We have a complete battle formation. You can rest assured about this. Once the battle starts, you will naturally see the unparalleled glory of the elven battle formation. Good, then we'll see the elven battle formation show its skills. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at the elven army that was meandering for thousands of miles, the god of archery sighed. This time we've returned to the elven forest for a short rest. It's also a good chance for the elves to witness the continuation of the Spring of Life and let them feel assured. We'll let them know that the elven race still has a future and that the heavens won't destroy the elven race. When we come out of the elven forest again, it'll be the time for the final battle against the extraterrestrial demons. As long as the extraterrestrial demons are not destroyed, even if we're all wiped out, not a single elf will retreat. Chu Yang's heart was a little heavy. He said, this battle may be exceptionally tragic and accompanied by many sacrifices. You must be mentally prepared. Your Majesty is benevolent. We've already prepared for the worst. The only thing that worries us is the future of the elven race. The god of archery answered seriously. Chu Yang nodded slightly. Along the way, Chu Yang could feel that his cultivation had once again advanced by leaps and bounds in a way that seemed to have no limits. An unprecedented and indescribable power came from all directions in the world. It was like 100 rivers converging into the sea, and it entered his body and then spread to his divine sense. There was also some extremely pure green energy that contained an unusually dense aura of life. It tempered his body bit by bit. This green energy should be the power of the elven race's support and the elven energy that the elven emperor's seal has attracted. Chu Yang was secretly distinguishing and calculating in his heart. And this power coming from all directions should be the power of destiny of the newly ascended imperial throne Xiongxiao. No wonder the Saint Monarch is immortal and indestructible. It turns out that he has such a powerful power of destiny to support him. Compared to the power of destiny of the other heavenly emperors, it's much more powerful. Under the support of such power, how can there be any accidents? But then he was puzzled again. But there seems to be something that doesn't make sense. Since I can feel it so clearly, and the saint has been on the throne for more than 1,000,000 years, his cultivation shouldn't be at this level, right? It should be higher. This is something that I can't understand. He discussed this problem with Mo Qingwu, Zi Xiecheng and the others when he was free during the march. However, they snorted at him. Are you stupid? Zi Xiecheng's words were the most impolite. This power of fate that comes from the heavens and earth is the most majestic and bright. Any evil person would avoid it like the plague. Only those who are righteous and hardworking can be compatible with it. Who are you? You're always thinking about exterminating the extraterrestrial demons and protecting heaven. When have you ever had any selfish desires? How can you not feel it? But what about the saint? He looked like a righteous monarch, but what was he like deep down in his bones? When did he really think about the people of the world? For his own selfish desires, he even killed his own father. How can he be recognized by the purest power of the world? His own cultivation and body are completely contrary to the essence of this power of destiny. It's already lucky that he didn't suffer a backlash. He still wants to be supported by this power. The god of archery also explained with a smile, so, as long as the saint doesn't give up on his despicable thoughts, he will never be able to enjoy such power. As for why the Eastern sovereign became the #1 person after De, it was also because of this point. Also, the Saint Lord's strength was not weak and was more than a level stronger than the Demon Empress. However, although the Demon Empress was at a disadvantage when fighting with him, she was still able to hold him back. It might be because of the blessing from the Demon Emperor Heaven that she was able to contend with the Saint Lord who was going all out. I see. Chu Yang was enlightened. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.